lot of your questions answered and hear some of your feedback for tonight. Zach, what's going on?
Yeah, talk about an interesting week. I mean, it's been an interesting day. Holy crap! The news that's come out on Twitter. We've seen the oil prices and gold prices go through the roof. Even more sanctions. Like, this is such a wild time in these markets. The price of wheat. Like, who is long wheat? Holy cow!
You see nickel? I think they had to stop trading on nickel.
Yeah, nickel's worth $1 now. It's crazy.
Bananas. Scott, what's going on?
Glad to be here. A lot of changes happening. Very excited to be here. Yeah, today is a good day.
Awesome. Just a reminder, if you guys are joining us or just joining us, please share the room out. Let everyone know we're live. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions tonight. Alex will probably show up in a bit. But in the meantime, we've got myself, Zach, and Scott here. So let's go ahead and start with our first person up here, Alexandre, what's going on?
Oh, hey, Josh.
How you doing?
Good, you?
I'm doing well.
Like you said, it's been crazy. Definitely excited to be hanging with you guys. I'm probably going to stick around for, obviously, asking Alex a question when he comes in, but definitely have a few of my followers already in the space. Excited to be part of the conversation and just chill. It's been a pretty wild day, like you said.
Yeah, thanks. And we really appreciate you coming tonight as well. So, yeah, you'll find that it'll be a treat. This is your first time here, too, correct?
I popped in about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're pretty happy to have you here, so feel free to stay up on stage and wait for Alex.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Alexandra, I wanted to ask, how did you get exposed to Celsius? First of all, I picked up on your tweet asking, what are people's impressions? You're asking people's impressions of Celsius, and just curious how you got exposed and how your experience has been so far.
Yeah, so I've been in crypto since 2017. Kind of originally saw the opportunity of making my crypto work for me with discovered Nexo first, and I kind of stuck with that. But in recent weeks, Nexo and BlockFi have ditched that product for American customers. So it made me looking, and I'd been on the periphery connected with Celsius. Always had a positive opinion. I've spoken to friends of mine who use Celsius are very happy community members, and so I thought I would dive in a bit more, and then I met Scott in person at a conference, crypto conference in Tampa, which actually spoke at, which is Celsius was a crucial part of putting that together. Pretty much put that conference on, so that was a great conference, and yes, I've always had kind of a good impression. And then, kind of about a month ago, that kind of was a wake up call to see, Nexo and BlockFi shift gears, so to speak, and, not really standing up for the kind of the whole idea why we're in crypto of creating a more fair, decentralized system, right? Because they're going to continue to, not to rag on them too much, but they're planning to cater to their institutional investors, basically. So the rest of the Americans are, going to stick to their 0.01% APY in a bank account. So I saw that and I wasn't very happy, and I turned to look back at Celsius. You guys are very friendly, and I looked at some of the, I dug into the wallet and the app on the phone and the website, and the features are very, they're very good. And actually started onboarding some of my friends in who are kind of barely in crypto. They don't really understand all the different products and services out. A friend of mine has been holding Bitcoin for a while, and he's got like cash sitting around. I'm like, no, you got to connect up. So I walked him through, and it was very easy. It was very new to crypto, and it was a good user experience. So that's been my experience so far. Definitely excited to connect up and keep using the products. And I came on Spaces about 3 weeks ago, and I was impressed. I could speak to the CEO, and he directly answered my question. It was very transparent, and he put himself out there to the community, which I think is a big deal. And it's definitely seems to be harder to do, or other people seem too busy or whatever. Not to rag on them, but I don't know any other major team leader that's out there every week able to answer any questions from the community. So that was very impressed with that. Impressed with the product, and I'm a strong believer in helping people achieve financial independence. And I think through products like the Earn product, is crucial to accomplishing that, because this isn't 2013. It's not that simple and obvious that someone walking into crypto tomorrow is going to become financially independent unless they do a bit more work. So it's going to be a bit harder. So I want to bring as many as my community members as possible and friends to get products like what Celsius has and use that to help them.
Yeah, that's great feedback, and I'm glad that you're a Celsian now. And Zach, go ahead. Were you unmuting?
It's good to be here.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for joining us up here on stage.
And just want to do a quick shout out. Juan C. Zapata is in the room. He's a good friend of mine, and from Florida, and Akomi. Juan's doing a lot with blockchain and government connections down in the state of Florida. Akomi is an NFT artist and community leader who just pulled off a big conference in Cabo, Mexico. And another good friend of mine who's always in DeFi, She Crypto's here. Shout out to them. And I'll be muting my mic button shortly and working to get some more friends in here.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Zach, did you have some comments you wanted to say before we...
No, go ahead.
All right. So obviously Alex will be joining us here in a little bit, but make sure you guys are sharing out the room, letting everyone know that we're live. Our topic and subject today is going to be basically gold versus Bitcoin. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and gold has finally started to move. And while we have Plan C in here, I wonder if you'd be interested in coming up and speaking on this topic. Is gold going to continue its steady rise as all of this geopolitical stuff is going on, or is Bitcoin going to prove itself finally as being a safe haven here in these types of times? Tecmo, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, everyone? To discuss the topic at hand, I think we're still a little ways away from Bitcoin being that safe haven. I think it's still too much aligned with the stock market, but I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I mean, anyone who knows about Bitcoin and actually learns about it knows it's the future. So it's just a matter of time. I'm not in any hurry. And gold is, ridiculous. But anyway, no questions this week. I just wanted to give a shout out to John Hodson and Araceli. Prop to them. I assume, Scott, before I say anything, that this is public.
Yes, it is.
Okay. That they just recently got hired on, I believe, on Scott's team. So I just wanted to give a huge shout out to them. They're fantastic ambassadors, and I've learned a lot from both of them. And they're just a great addition to the team.
Congratulations, guys.
Yeah, those are two wonderful community members that have been champions in the ambassador program, have helped many, 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 many people. So well deserved for those two.
Yeah, definitely well deserved. Plan C, I see you welcomed us up or joined us up here on stage. I know you're probably highly opinionated on this particular subject. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing in the data?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like Bitcoin or gold and stuff, like I have no idea. I mean, I like as far as which will perform better, or yeah, I mean, I would say like myself personally, like when I first got into crypto, I wasn't really interested in gold at all. Mostly just interested in crypto. But now, I mean, I would say that there's a better argument for gold in this current climate than there probably was a couple of years ago, at least when I got into crypto. So yeah, I'm more interested in it, but it just totally depends on what people's goals are, right? Like, I mean, I think gold will do well. Bitcoin will also do well. Bitcoin will also be more volatile. Clearly, I mean that's obvious. Everyone knows that. As far as like potential upside and you know, if someone's wanting to, this depends on the position people are in. Ultimately, that's the way I look at it. Like if you're in a position where you're focused on just storing or like holding on to your wealth in this climate, then yeah, I mean you definitely want a house in gold. I'm more interested in gold than ever, and I feel like once I hit some of my targets, I'll be using the product that Celsius offers. I mean, I've been thinking about that more, just how nice it is that they have that product in the app where you can get a interest. So you're hedging yourself against the inflation, or you're combating the inflation of that we're dealing with, and also holding something like that's proven like gold. So didn't really answer your question. I don't really know. I'm not like super focused on analyzing gold. I'm focused on Bitcoin, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think Bitcoin will do well. I'm actually more interested in gold than I've ever been. That's kind of the main point.
Well, that's fair enough. Well, are we still getting lots of adoption? Are we still getting new wallets coming in?
Everything's pretty quiet right now. Like to be honest with you guys, like as far as Bitcoin goes, I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot of signs that we're actually like my personal opinion on it is I call it a mid-cycle correction. Like I believe, or mid-cycle accumulation, mid-cycle correction. So personally, like I'm looking at it more as this cycle's not finished. You know, we had our initial peak last year, and now we don't have like a reaccumulation corrective phase for the last 10 months. Really, like I didn't look at November from last year as being a peak. It was really the April peak. The November one was a bit of an anomaly from last year. So point being that for myself, like I'm looking at all the data, and from what I'm seeing, I mean, we're seeing a lot of the similar signs that, for like in the past when we've had bear market floors, like literally the bottom of the bear markets, like there's a lot of data that's lining up with that. It's just the prices aren't going nearly as low, and we're just not having like the capitulation. Like it's regardless of what anyone thinks. I mean, it's just a different, like we're just in a different period now where there's just demand, like between 30 and 35,000. There's just enough demand in that range that, we've held that for over a year now. And the question is, are we going to see, it go below that? But we don't have a ton of demand coming to the network right now, but we don't have a lot of sell pressure. We've had so much capitulation over the last few months, and really like since the peak in April even of last year, that there's just not a lot of people left to sell. Like we're just seeing all the metrics to hodling go up. So I don't know where these sellers are going to come from that are going to take us to 20,000. I definitely don't believe we're going that low. My current floor model that I've been working on for a while is at 26.5K. And so that's to me is like my current kind of floor price. But I don't even think we necessarily get that low. Like it's, it's really hard to say, to be honest with you guys. But we're not seeing a lot of interest in Bitcoin. It's pretty muted with the on-chain data right now. Like I don't know if you guys remember past cycles, but this is our version of like a corrective. You call it a bear market or corrective phase, but this is essentially a way milder, easier version than what we've had in the past. But it is a version of those deep kind of times where people have been uninterested in crypto. Like it's kind of interesting. Does that answer your question, Josh, or did I make any sense there?
Yeah, I got a lot of information out of that. It's just so you think 26 is the base. You don't foresee any sort of black swan event coming, especially with all the stuff going on with the oil rising and the knock-on effects from that, and maybe central banks around the world, shifting over to gold. We don't see them shifting to Bitcoin yet.
Yeah, no, I think they will. There's there's a lot of different opinions on that. Like I do think it's very interesting how much some of these countries have accumulated as far as gold, and how if they're looking to do somewhat of a reset of the economy or the global like financial system, I mean, gold could play a role as a backing of some sort of central bank digital currency. Like that theory to me is starting to hold more water than it ever has. I mean, how else to get the population to adopt a new system? Go back and use something that they've wanted you to use. Like it adds credibility. Like if they want to have their new, I hate to say it, but their new digital control grid with the ID and all this stuff, they need to convince people, and I think gold is a way to do that. So I'm not kind of like out of the question that gold could be used to somewhat back one of these central bank digital currencies. Having said that, we could see the same with Bitcoin. Who knows? I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere regardless of any of that stuff. Like that stuff will probably happen, but it's just it's just Bitcoin's going to still be there. It's just not, yeah, I'm not, but yeah, as far as like the bottom, like, I mean, 26,500 to me, that is the bottom with all these events. Like that is like that, it would take a black swan or like crazy event to get us to go there, right? So that model that I'm using is never broken in the whole history of Bitcoin. Never closed a single day below that model, and it's timed the bottoms of the two bear markets and then the COVID crash. So yeah, it's that is like the worst case scenario for me currently. Yeah, I guess that if that makes sense.
So that's the 200-day moving average you're looking at then.
No, it's not. It's the 200 days actually at or the 200 week I should say is at around 21,000 I think right now, or 20,000. No, this is a model I made with 3 different on-chain floor models, and I combined them together to get Confluence, and it just yeah, that's just where it's lining up. I just posted on Twitter a very interesting chart where if you have the short-term holder, what's called the short-term holder cost basis floor model, basically when 2 of these floor models cross, it signaled the bottoms of the bear markets and the COVID crash, and right now we're just about to cross. So like, and the interesting thing is where the crosses occur, because these are 2 floor models that are crossing. It's almost like the pi cycle top. If you guys know that one, it's like when they cross, it signals the tops. This is almost like the same thing, but for the bottoms. And because it's 2 floor models, when they cross, it can cross before the actual drop. So a couple times it's crossed like a few weeks before the drop, but the drop will actually come down to where these floors meet. So the interesting thing is right now they're at one of the floor models is at 29,000, the other one's at 26.5. So in theory, when they cross, which should happen in the next few weeks, historically speaking, the price will drop to the where those models cross. So I'm expecting, like, if they do, and if this repeats, I mean, it's only the last 3 times. Like it's happened 3 times in a row, but there's no guarantee it'll happen again. It's only 3 data points. But if it does happen, we could see in the next 6 weeks. I guess the worst case scenario, we drop to maybe like 27, 28,000 range, and that's kind of like the floor, and then we go up from there. That's kind of how I'm seeing it.
Well, that certainly is a nice dose of hopium. I appreciate that, Plancy. Maybe my dad will stop calling me an idiot here soon. Jeff, I noticed you're up on stage. Did you want to add to this topic, or do you have any questions for us?
Oh, hey. So actually, the answer to that is no. I don't have a question on this topic. I don't know how strict you guys are about sticking to the topic. But I just, any word about what's going on with Crypto.com calling all their loans?
Yeah, I mean, I addressed this on Twitter. I don't have any special knowledge myself. I definitely want to ask Alex when he comes in here. But yeah, we'll see what he says. I've got no news about that happening on Celsius' side, but we will ask him, see if he has any more insight.
Okay, yeah, I heard they're calling all their loans, and like they're giving people a week to come up to raise funds to pay off their loans, which is a bit concerning for folks who have loans. So yeah, that would be a good question to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, I saw that earlier today. Josh sent it to me, and we shared it internally. That's a pretty brutal situation. Yeah. So
big time.
And Jeff, you're definitely not alone. Just today I got a bunch of emails and text about it as well. So that's so we'll make sure we bring that up to Alex to get his thoughts on it as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, it's rough for the Crypto.com folks. But I'm looking forward to see what Alex has to say on that subject. Nick, welcome up on stage, and thanks, Jeff, for your question there.
Hey, Josh, Zach, Scott. Yeah, I'll just comment on that. Whenever you see a company pulling their loans, they got a liquidity crisis. So that means they're close to bankruptcy. But anyway, back on the topic, if you look at what's been happening in the world for quite a while, we have a brewing liquidity crisis. And the way to spot that is you can look at the last 40 minutes of trading on the stock market each day. And if you look, Wednesday last week, everyone bought the dip. Thursday last week, everyone bought the dip. Friday last week, everyone bought the dip. And then Monday, no one bought the dip. and in the last 40 minutes, volumes went up, and you had the start of panic setting in. And then today it kind of settled down a bit, but we haven't had the crisis yet. We're brewing to the crisis, and so you know, if you look at 2008, 2009, or 2000, you can see these things coming, and that this has exactly the same characteristics as all of those, except it's going to be much bigger.
So it sounds like you're in the camp of a black swan event.
Well, let's go back and look at geopolitics, right? For the last 30 years, China started accumulating gold. The US has about 8,000 tons of gold, right? And they got all that gold from the end of World War I and World War II, when they were the only people standing, and they had 80% of the world's energy. So they were very, very powerful until maybe the mid 80s, and then they started accumulating all this debt. But what China's been doing for 30 years is accumulating gold and not disclosing it. So they probably right now got about 30,000. They've got about 30,000 tons of gold, which would be about 4 times more than the US. Russia's got a little bit less than the US. And in my view, what Putin's done, I mean, remember, all politicians are complete idiots, right? But Putin is the most strategic of the idiots. What he needed was a crisis, and he could have picked on Finland or Ukraine because they're neither of them in NATO. And the crisis he's caused is basically to get taken off, basically be blockaded everywhere, and so that he can switch the biggest currency in the world, which is energy. He's got about 10 million barrels, or 10% of the world's oil output a year, in an oil market that has no spare capacity in it. All the cheap oil in the world's been used up. And the big crisis is the energy crisis. And what will happen over the next 2 to 3 years is that countries with energy will be able to break the dollar peg and price their energy in some other currency, maybe gold. I mean, that's, if you look at what the countries with energy have been doing, they've been accumulating gold to try and break the back of the dollar, and then be able to reprice in gold. And what that would do is, we know China and Russia are working closer together. Russia will be able to sell all of its energy to China, so they don't need Europe, and they don't need the US. But in doing that, they can break the back of the dollar, right, and stop the petrodollar. And that would cause hyperinflation in Europe and the US. And, you start to see the first warning signs of hyperinflation, right? Just look at, especially you see it in Europe, the natural gas price yesterday was 15 times higher than in the US. 15 times higher. So imagine heating your home, right, 1 year and coming along the next year, and it's 15 times more. The price of electricity in Italy went up 50% yesterday, day over day. So this is what's really happening in the world. Once you strip away everything else, this Putin-led crisis is to break the dollar, right? And they've been setting up for it for years. Russia 5 years ago started paying off all of its US debts, so they weren't dependent on the dollar, that the sanctions wouldn't mean that much. And Russia's going to go through a whole bunch of pain, and they may well collapse, and Putin may well get assassinated. But his plan is to break the US dollar from the petrodollar, and then to be able to price energy, may potentially in gold instead of dollars. And if you think through the ramifications of that, it is super scary. It's a crisis like, it's like we've never seen before.
It would have massive consequences. It would be like immediate, large-scale war.
Well, you'll have, well, no, it wouldn't be war necessarily, but you'd have the price of oil, which is last week it crossed 100. I think it's like 120 a barrel now. It could easily go to 1,000 in 2 or 3 years, right? And you can imagine what that will do if you try and use your car, right? I have a farm on the West Coast. If you look at fertilizer cost year over year, it's about 130%. It's derived from natural gas. You look at energy costs, it's close to 100%. So next winter, there's going to be a massive food crisis as well as food inflation. So, that's the kind of backdrop. Crypto is a tiny market relative to world liquidity. And so the crypto cycles, as we become bigger and bigger part of the financial system, will disappear in terms of the old way of looking at things, and they'll become more part of the global liquidity. So, I'm a believer in Bitcoin. I own Bitcoin. I'm a believer in gold. I own gold. I'm a big believer in Cell Token. So I'm a big supporter of Celsius, but I don't think anyone understands what's going on. And, there's a few people that do. Luke Gorman, I think it is. There's a couple of analysts out there that understand, that see the big picture about how China and Russia are trying to break the back of the dollar and reprice break the dollar system. China would love it because, they'd suddenly become the world's reserve currency in theory for a few years. And Russia would like it because they'd immediately be able to price energy in gold. And, gold is about $5 for 100 barrels right now. I mean, oil's about $5 for 100 barrels. Since the world's so short of oil, they could price it for 100 ounces of gold. Sorry, what am I saying? They could price it 100 barrels of gold for about 1 ounce of gold. And you would see the world absolutely go crazy, because the Western world is so dependent on energy outside its boundaries, right? And energy is the ultimate currency. Europe is really in bad shape because they import all of their energy. Asia's not in great shape because they import all of their energy. The US is in okay shape because right now we're self-sufficient pretty much in oil. But if you look at the 4 fracking fields in the US, 3 of them are going down. And the last one, the Permian in New Mexico and Texas, is going to peak oil late this year or early next. And the fracking wells lose 40% of their oil a year. So you have to, when you look at all of this, you can see that by 2030, the world's going to be a very, very different place. So that's all I had to say.
It's an interesting perspective. I would just, you speak about it so nonchalantly. I feel like it would be extremely hard.
I've been studying it for the last 60 years. That's why.
It just seems it's a long shot. It's like their Hail Mary. I don't see that being an easy thing to pull off. And by the way, guys, up here on stage, feel free to, we'll be popcorn style till Alex gets in here. Yeah. So if you have an opinion, feel free to hit the raise hand button and I'll shift over to you. But Nick, go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah, I mean, just to show you how close the world is to peak oil, right? Conventional oil is losing about 6 million. We're about 100 million barrels a day, right? It's the world output of oil. We're losing about 6 million a year. We're replacing about 2 million a year. And yeah, if there was more investment, it would push it up a little. But to be quite honest, there's very little cheap oil left. Even expensive oil, there's very little of that that's easily got to. So, world GDP is 99.5% linked to oil production, oil and natural gas production. So there's nothing that rivals it in terms of predicting future GDP as the 100 million barrels a day. If that came down, if we're losing 6 million a year and we're replacing 2, that says you're coming down 4% a year. And that's probably overstating it, but that would be a 4% GDP loss a year just due to beginning to run out of oil. And that's kind of like Great Depression territory, just on the first year. Anyway, that's my perspective. You can pack it away and check in a year or two from now and see where it's at.
It's an interesting perspective. I'm glad that you're up here on stage. Olia Maid, I'm sure I butchered that.
Okay. Yeah. Good morning. It's morning in Africa. So I just wanted to add 2 or 3 statements to last speaker's analysis. First of all, I feel that the reason why we're seeing a positive correlation between Bitcoin and the US stock market is that, first of all, you need to understand that institutional investors are not buying to the sentiment that Bitcoin is a safe haven asset. And you need to understand that central banks have substantial holdings in gold. Also, you need to look at the fact that Bitcoin is very liquid, it's more liquid than gold. So it's much easier for investors to liquidate than the bullion assets. So that's why we're really seeing some pragmatic shifts in the market. But I really want to talk about the future of the crypto market in correlation with Bitcoin. So I feel that the market is going to go through massive correction. A lot of us have forgotten that this is an era of interest rate hike. We're expecting at least 1,000 basis points in 2022 from the United States US Fed Reserve Bank, and that definitely would put a lot of pressure on growth and crypto assets that fall under the bracket of riskier assets. So the parabolics of the market will start activating. But I feel that America is well positioned against the rest of the world. It's more immune against a lot of economic setbacks because, first of all, you need to see that based on job reports, the US economy is firing up on all cylinders. Also, in the energy market, US is a leading producer of crude oil and natural gas. And against this, against the sentiments that a lot of people felt that during the era of Joe Biden, oil majors are not producing more. I think data suggests that that is otherwise. So I feel that what they're trying to do is squeeze the Russians, and I think it's really working because for you to see President Putin making nuclear threats shows that the circle is feeling the heat. And I feel that the only problem is just that Europe is badly affected by this crisis. We could see what's happening in the euro. The euro is down more than a decade old, suggesting that investors are fleeing to the United States and the US credit market. Also, we are seeing stocks tanking. So the question is, how would US be able to, how would Europe be able to stand this pressure? So weighing on all these things, it means that investors in the crypto market need to be very, very careful, cautious, because if you look at the numbers right now, liquidity is drying up. NFT market liquidity slumped by more than 30% in February, and that just tells you that when the US crypto regulation comes to play, we definitely will see a lot of assets going under because you need to understand factorization of asset security. The Security Exchange Commission is concerned that some assets have security parameters around. So I feel like on the larger macro scale, that things are going to get tough in 2022. We're already seeing inflation in emerging markets, unrest already ongoing, so much because of energy costs. And Ukraine also plays a dynamic role in the food equilibrium of global markets in terms of corn, wheat. So we are feeling a lot of pressure in areas where people depend on those produce. So I just wanted to highlight all those things and ensure that, okay, we need to face the fact that the crypto market, the one we saw in 2021, is unlikely to take place in 2022. But the good part of it is that I feel that some quality assets will stay on board, will survive. Well, we'll see substantial amount going off the loop. We're going to see a lot going on extinction because of the questionable fundamentals. We have about 17,000 crypto projects already. I feel like more than half will go under. So I just wanted to add my points on this. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us up here. So, do you not think that Bitcoin will reach an all-time high this year?
I don't share that sentiment because I don't share that sentiment because of the tightening liquidity across market. But however, I think that can only happen if we see what comes out of the crypto regulation framework from the United States and also institutional adoption. That will make the difference. That's what made the difference in 2021, institutional adoption. If that maintains the pace, which seems to be unlikely because we are seeing institutions being very conserved with cash and putting much more in other alternative investment rather than crypto markets, I think it's pretty unlikely.
Thank you for joining us up here on stage. I appreciate your opinion. Stephen, welcome up on stage. Did you have an opinion on what we've been talking about here?
Yes, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Okay, I just was going to comment on what Nick was sharing. Very interesting, obviously, very interesting perspective. And I just actually listened to a podcast, and the name of the podcast was Banker Publishes Shocking Note on Bitcoin and US Dollar. And it's published on the Anthony Pompliano channel. And anyway, he is publishing this letter from a little known guy by the name of Zoltan Pozsar. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. You are cutting just a little bit, and I did see the Anthony Pompliano thing as well, so continue.
Okay, so this gentleman, Zoltan Pozsar, he also popped up in the book I read 2 years ago called Fed Up. Some little guy, a nerdy guy in the middle of the Federal Reserve Board who he has his hands in every possible place. And right now he is the managing director of global head of short-term interest rate strategy based in New York. And what they printed here, I guess I could see it. He said that we are heading for a Bretton Woods 3. This is going back to what Nick was talking about with the Russian strategy to bring down the dollar hegemony. So it's really interesting because he wrote this piece in the banking circles all about Bretton Woods number 3. And I mean, we have a friend of Celsius, Simon Dixon, and he always talks about Bretton Woods number 2. And anyway, in the short piece by Anthony, he's reading the whole piece about what Bretton Woods 3 could be. Simon Dixon says that it's going to be like a financial agreement between the haves and have-nots. Those who have gold, those who have Bitcoin, and those who have commodities. So it's kind of interesting right now what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. Not going to get into the politics there, but for sure we could see, or I could see, some type of economic meeting coming out of all of this to kind of rebalance the very, very slanted world economic picture of the dollar just having so much advantage over any other currency. So basically in this thing he's talking about, he actually mentions Bitcoin in that piece that he wrote. So I guess the next few months going into the next year are going to be very interesting times. That's all I can say.
Yeah, Jay Gels, did you have something as well to say? Jay Gels, are you there? All right, I guess not. Well, Stephen, I agree with you. I'm not so sure, though these are dark times, I'm not so sure that we're going to go that extreme route. Hopefully, I mean that's like calls for a larger conflict if we go Nick's route. But I'm also not completely.
Well, no, not really. I mean, if you have an economic summit to kind of iron out all of the war type of situations, then I'm not kind of looking at that Bretton Woods number 2 or 3 as like kind of a cataclysmic, apocalyptic kind of end of the world, but just more like the people that have been outside the dollar circle having more ability to kind of balance out the world economic scenario, give everybody in the world more of a say in the division of the pie, so to speak. And I don't think it necessarily comes from the outcome of war. I think it might come like out of, this is my own personal perspective, outcome of threat of war. Like, okay, let's all get together. We got to stop this. It's getting very dangerous. But I'm optimistic about that. I'm not pessimistic about that.
Gotcha. Tecmo, did you want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say when Nick was talking, he mentioned Luke Gromen, and one of my favorite podcasts is the We Study Billionaires Investors podcast. They do a weekly Bitcoin podcast by Preston Pish, and just last week they had Luke Gromen on. So just wanted to recommend that. B, if you guys haven't read Jeff Booth's Price of Tomorrow, I just finished that, and it goes into a lot of the future predictions of how technology is going to affect things, and just this discussion reminded me of both of those things. So worth a listen. Well, I do audiobooks, so worth a listen to each of those. Did want to make two comments. One, in general, we kind of keep talking about, like, do we see this being a black swan or that being a black swan? Like Talib, the definition of a black swan is something that we don't expect. It's here's a giant pandemic. It's something that we're not going to foresee coming. We can talk about it all here, and then boom, aliens land, and that's the black swan, right? So that's not really something we can predict that by definition. But who knows? I mean, aliens come down, they straighten everything out. They say, yeah, Bitcoin's king, whatever. But and then the other thing I just wanted to mention is, like, I think these discussions are super interesting. Nick and Steven, we got a lot of really intelligent people in the room that are far more knowledgeable on some of these topics than I am. But I do want to point out that, like, just a few months ago, everyone was confident Bitcoin was going to 100K. Now everyone's like, oh man, we're either going to be just staying where we are or maybe going down to the 20s. Like, no one knows. Like you can make as many predictions based on TA and global macro events and everything as much as you can, but there's just so many variables involved that no one can accurately actually predict the future. So that's why the solution is really just HODL. Make good investments the best you can. Don't try to time the market, and stay up to date on news. But if anyone's trying to time the market and predict, just remember, everyone was saying 100K by December. Oh, that's the top. We're going. And look where we are. And now you're going to have this the flipped sentiment. I'm not one that believes that people can accurately predict that. They can look at, this indicator, that indicator, this macro event, that macro event, but there's 1,000 variables involved. And then you have this black swan over here that no one can predict. So these are really good discussions to have. And I love getting deep into philosophical and all kinds of different discussions. I love hearing them. But for anybody who's listening, I kind of wanted to just remind people that, don't make investment decisions based on these prognostications, because people can't accurately predict the future. If they could, they would be billionaires. Okay, that's all.
I just want to add something quickly. Like, first of all, I was one of the only people that actually didn't predict Bitcoin to go to over 100,000 at the end of last year. But so, like, not everyone got it wrong. A lot of people did, but not everyone. And the other thing I would add is, like, 100% agree with you. No one, of course, can predict the future. No one's going to perfectly time everything. There's no way. But what you can do is you can increase your probability. What you can do is you can approximate, when things are extremely oversold based on, a lot of data points. So, like, you definitely want confluence between a lot of TA and a lot of on-chain metrics. And of course, you got to factor in macro and all these other variables. And like you said, there's just so many things going on that it makes it extremely complicated, and it makes it extremely difficult to do. But having said all that, I mean, you absolutely, if you're using all these tools, you do increase your edge in the market over other people. And I'm a long-term holder, so, like, all I'm trying to do, is dollar cost average in as close to the bottom and, DC out as close to the top as possible. But yeah, there are a lot of signals that increase your chances of getting a good entry and increasing your lowering your risk. So yeah, I do agree with most of what you said, but I just add that I wouldn't throw out all these tools because, you know, throughout the history of Bitcoin, we've had lots of different events. I mean, we've had lots of different things where there was uncertainty. I mean, in the past cycles, I mean, we didn't even know if Bitcoin would survive. So everyone's panicking right now, you know, thinking that this is like unprecedented. But ultimately, like if the people that have been here for a long time, like you talk to anyone that's been here since like say 2011, they would tell you that this is like the easiest time to be holding Bitcoin compared to those past bear cycles when we didn't even know if Bitcoin was going to survive or come back. You know, there's been lots of times in the past where it's been just way more question marks. You know, Bitcoin's down 85%. I mean, Bitcoin's not even down 50% right now, and people are panicking. Like it's kind of silly. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to like completely say like, you know, of these 1,000 variables, if you can figure out 50 or 100 of them, that it doesn't give you an edge, right? It obviously does. You know, if there are, let's pretend there's 1,000 variables, and you're able to look at all kinds of signals and macros, and you were able to figure out 78 of them, and other people are only able to see 5. Like that's your edge right there. I come from a professional poker background. Like you always looking at probabilities and a slight edge. So I didn't mean for it to sound like, you know, it's all nonsense. I'm just saying that there are so many variables involved that it's very difficult, and you try to find your edge where you can, and then you just try to, you know. But I don't recommend, like, even someone like yourself. I mean, you're way smarter than I am in the TA side of things. But like, you know, I'm just talking to the retail, you know, average investor. Don't just be like, oh, Pi Cycle Top, got it. I'm, you know, making all my decisions based on that, or the Meyer multiple, or whatever, you know, EMA is going on. Like, take all of those into your decision making, but then kind of just DCA, you know, kind of just, you know, if the basics of investing is what I always say to most people is what you're gonna be successful in. And but obviously, you know, someone like you is going to be way more intelligent on those types of things. So I hope I didn't misrepresent.
No, not at all, man. I completely hear what you're saying. Like, I think it's you know, usually it's good to DCA into markets, but now I think it's probably, you know, as good argument as ever, if not more, just because the uncertainties. So yeah, for all the people that are long-term holders, like I'm not a trader at all. So like for me, I'm not looking to do trades. All I'm simply doing is identifying when, you know, Bitcoin is close to bottoming out. And, you know, when you can identify that, it gives you a more confidence when you start to DCA in. So if you can look at, you know, the data points and say, okay, you know, historically speaking, through the whole history of Bitcoin, you know, this is the bottom 5%. I'm getting a bottom 5% entry. Like all the data points line up. It doesn't guarantee I'm going to get the bottom, but it gives me a better probability than just randomly putting your money in at any point in the market. And yeah, if you're following the sentiment, like, oh my goodness, like the last thing you want to be doing, and that's why I focus on the data, is simply because, I mean, if you're just following the sentiment, it shifts every week, and yeah, you're just going to get wrecked. So yeah, I agree with you. Just DCA in. Don't rely on one indicator. If you don't know what you're doing, then just don't rely on any indicators. If you do know what you're doing, you know, try to get at least 10 or 20 indicators that you're confident in. And even then, you know, you might not get it right. So.
Awesome. Well, I really love these types of conversations as well. Good stuff from both you, Plan C, and Tecmo. I put the probability highest with the alien theory for sure. Before I move on to the next person, make sure you guys are sharing out the room. Let everyone know we're live. Alex will be joining us here probably in the next 10 minutes or so. So have your questions ready. I'll be asking him about the gold versus Bitcoin as well. JJels, I think you were up next, and then I'll move over to Alexandre.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me up. I actually just wanted a slight change of topic. It also has to do with the global macro landscape, and it's just something that I'm a little bit confused on currently. Obviously, there's a lot of factors and variables that go into all this kind of stuff. I was listening to Twitter Spaces yesterday between Preston Pysh, Dylan LeClaire, and some people. And something that they brought up that just confused me a little bit, which is true, is that last year, the U.S. global debt, or the U.S. debt to GDP ratio went down. And I think it went down from like 130% to like 122%. And I'm just confused in terms of the mechanism of action by which that happened. I mean, to my knowledge, we still ran a deficit last year. So I'm just wondering if anyone has an understanding of that or an ability to direct me to what I need to look up to see how we actually decreased that very simple metric. I mean, you just have two sides of the equation. You have the debt and you have the GDP. GDP went up, I think like 6.2%. And then I mean, the debt must have gone up as well. So I just don't understand how we did that.
I've got a bit of an answer, a partial answer on that, if you want me to take it up.
Go ahead, Alexandre.
One thing to think with in terms of the GDP figure is it was unusually high, one of the highest years on record, because also with, the previous year was negative GDP with the economy closing down with COVID. So you see a lot of figures that look, extremely high in terms of the GDP. It was a recovery from, there have been like no down years of the GDP. So the fact that it was negative, it was very easy to rocket it. So that possibly affected the figures. I'm not sure about the other side of it, but that's just on that figure.
Yeah, and I mean, the GDP was inflated. I mean, we pumped so much liquidity into the system. The Fed bought so many treasuries with newly printed money and dumped it into the economy. But as I said, I think GDP was only up like 6%. So for us to have decreased the debt to GDP from like 130 to 120, the math just doesn't seem to add up to me unless we did something really shisty in there, like just printing money, giving it to the government to pay off some of the debt and decrease it. But I just don't know if there's any way to view that. I don't know if I'm missing some kind of a variable. Yeah, if anyone knows, I'd love to hear it. But if not, all good.
Yeah, I don't know anything beyond that. Normally, the GDP has been increasing at like somewhere around 2% per year. When the previous president came in and said he could increase it by 3%, a lot of people told him he was insane. So to give you 6% actually is like more than, significant in relation, but I don't have more data.
Sure. And I mean, if you pump 40% of the money supply into the economy, nominally, the GDP is going to go up. But in terms of the actual value transfer, it's been very much corrupted.
100%. Yeah.
Right.
Also, if you shut down a bunch of industries and then you just turn the lights on, they're going to expand from nothing to something. But yeah, there's obviously a tremendous, I think 40% of the cash printed was in the last 2 years or something.
Yeah, absolutely nuts. Yeah, well, if anybody does have any more information on how that statistic was altered so drastically last year, I'd love to hear it. But if not, I'm more than happy if we move on.
Yep, and if anyone in the room has that information, make sure you DM Jay Gels. Alexandre, while you've got the mic, did you have any more input on what we're speaking about here, or did you want me to move on?
Yeah, I just wanted a quick comment that you sometimes kind of economic events are usually viewed from the past, from the future, like from later. Like, for example, we talk about the last bear market, but when we started in the bear market, of course, you don't know you're in the bear market until you get out of the bear market. So, because you were just in the peak. So the point I just wanted to make was that we did have a black swan event. Russia invaded Ukraine and half the world sanctioned Russia. So, and the fact that, the U.S. could ban Russian oil was even being talked about over the last few weeks. I think priced in the market a little bit. I think it could get much worse in the short term. But I think that is the black swan event that we're kind of not quite noticing. And I think that's why all these other, technical analysis on crypto and Bitcoin have gone totally out the window, because it is a black swan event, and there are direct and indirect side effects that we'll probably not even notice for months or even possibly years, if ever, unless you're studying, about obscure economic data. So anyway, I just pointed out that we did hit the black swan event. No one was particularly expecting that, even though some said, "Oh, I was right about Putin." Yeah, maybe, but we weren't necessarily expecting him to invade on February 24th and time that into the market. So I think that was a black swan event, and it affects all markets. And gold is going up, and oil and various commodities are going up out of terror of investor terror, out of the what's going to happen in the future and the uncertainty of that. And that's all.
You bring up a good point, and if that's the case, then Bitcoin is sitting pretty.
Yeah, and I think it didn't hurt that Bitcoin already dropped, significantly from its all-time high, almost 50%, and it was kind of like, okay, well, that run was kind of over. I think the fact that it had gone down quite a bit helped. And look, again, like you mentioned, we can't tell the future, but every time Bitcoin's dropped down to the 29, 30 range, whether last, I think it was May or whatever, or maybe it was whenever, it dipped in the middle of the bull market and then went back up. Like when it hit around 30, the buying pressure gets really heavy and it goes back up from what we've seen, right? So I don't know that it's going to go below that 28, 30, whatever, 33 area.
So it sounds like you and Plan C are kind of aligned.
Yeah, I'd say so. I like a lot of the things you said about it.
Awesome. Well, guys, looks like the main event is upon us. Make sure you guys are sharing out the room. Let everyone know that we're live. And if you'd like to join us up on stage, just tap the mic in the bottom left. Alex, welcome in.
Hi, everybody. I guess it's double Alex today. You're getting double the normal,
Yes, sir.
So, Alex, we've been going kind of hard on the topic of gold and Bitcoin and what's happening like geopolitically. Someone even came up and had a theory that Russia was making these moves on purpose to basically get the world to de-dollarize and reprice oil, in gold or maybe in a gold-backed renminbi. What are your thoughts on everything that's going on and what the impact of it might be? Gold versus Bitcoin. Who's going to be the winner here, at least in the medium term?
Yeah, I mean, dollar is still king. Mentioned several times that 80% of the world's transactions are still denominated in dollar. Obviously, all oil trades in dollars, petrodollar. So I just don't see. There are other ways Russia can try to fight the dollar instead of starting a war in the Ukraine. It's costing them something like 20 billion a day right now to run this war, with having hundreds of thousands of troops and all the supply chains and everything else kind of dedicated to the war efforts. So it's not a cheap endeavor, right? And obviously the sanctions and everything else is gonna put a very large toll on their economy. So I think the drivers here are political and not economic, right? I mean, yes, the price of oil went up, and Putin, in a way, is making some of that back by selling his oil at a higher price. But, I think the US will squeeze that as well immediately after we kind of ramp up production or in the United States, or get a deal done with Iran, or get Saudi Arabia to crank up another 2 or 3 million barrels a day from their reserves. So I think right now the issue at hand is he wants a chunk of the Ukraine, at least half of it, and the question is just how many people is he willing to kill for it? That's basically what we don't know.
And on top of it, spending $20 billion a day, it just doesn't seem like a sensible decision. There's a couple guys up here on stage, and I'm sure in the audience that think we're at or near a bottom. And Alexandro even going as far to say that this would be like the black swan event. What's going on here? Do you see any more downside for Bitcoin?
Well, I am kind of disappointed that that we did not decouple or detach from the Qs, right? We traded not as badly as the Qs. We didn't go down as much as the Qs in the last few days, so that gives me a little bit of comfort. But gold was up almost every day, 1, 2, 3%. So finally, gold is doing what it's supposed to do. and Bitcoin is not doing what it's supposed to do. So as I said, and like I think I did an interview on February 22nd, right before the war started, and then another one a few days later, and I kept saying that we have to see. I don't expect, unfortunately, Bitcoin to behave the way it's supposed to, because there's too many people who trade Tesla and Apple and Google. It's the same people that also trade Bitcoin. So the marginal person who sets the price is the person who buys and sells every day, not the hodler. The hodler doesn't set the price, right? Most of the people on this call are hodlers, and we don't set the price, right? So fortunately, the people who are trading are still a big enough cohort that they affect the movement. And you saw a little bit of that with gold, right? So when the fear of war was there, when Biden said, "Hey, we Russia is going into the Ukraine," gold went down a little bit, and then it started going up. So because when there is fear, everybody goes into the safest assets, and unfortunately, those are U.S. Treasuries and cash. And when you have to sell because you have margin calls and so on, you also, many people sell their gold as well. So I think we should have good support here for Bitcoin, but I don't know what Biden signed. He supposedly this week is supposed to announce what he actually signed, this new decree about Bitcoin. If that's negative, we're gonna test the 30,000, right? If he put in there right now, I think it has let's see what it does to the environment. Let's see what it does to our financial system or financial stability. And let's come up with a plan for CBDC for the United States. Those, I think, are 3 directives of this thing, but no one has actually seen the signed form. So we don't know what's in there. And I'm sure there's something in there that we're not going to like. So we may retest that 30 to 33 support yet one more time.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I was hoping someone would get you to that question about the stuff from Biden coming out here towards the end of the week. But I'm glad you brought it up, Zach or Scott. Before I get rolling onto the questions here, did you guys have anything you wanted to ask?
Yeah. Additionally, we wanted to ask. Just a few hours ago, we saw an announcement from Crypto.com saying that their loans will have to be immediately closed in the next week, giving users not a lot of time to get funds together and get that out, and then they may get forced liquidated. Just curious what you think, Alex, is behind that action, and of course, users are asking if something like that is going to happen to Celsius.
Yeah, I don't know what the details are. I could only imagine that either they got some action from a regulator, or they realized that they need the state licenses and they just didn't follow the rules. I don't know. But I think I mentioned before that their global campaign, while it might have been positive for crypto because it got a lot of people aware of crypto, right? And Matt Damon and all that stuff had a lot of negative connotations because it woke up regulators all over the world to say, "Hey, you don't have licenses in our countries while you're advertising all over our media," and that's considered solicitation, right? So they basically woke up the sleeping bears and caused havoc all over Europe and North America and so on. So this is not just a U.S. action. They've got basically action from regulators all over the world. And I know a lot of times people ask us, why isn't Celsius advertising more? Why don't you get your brand everywhere? Why don't you have all your content in Spanish or in Japanese or in German or whatever? And it's because that's how you stay compliant, is you don't try to solicit Germans unless you have a BaFin license. So when you run these things in Germany, and the regulators basically take action. So again, obviously we're all on the crypto side. We it's not like I want ill for crypto.com, but when they make these kind of like basic mistakes, it hurts all of us. It doesn't help all of us. But to answer your question, I don't see any issues with us, right? Because we're not changing anything we're doing. We didn't do anything that I know wrong before, and we're not doing anything wrong right now. And we only operate where we either have a license or we have an exemption.
Well, that's good to hear, and thank you for answering that, Alex. Before we get rolling here, guys, just last call, please share the room out, let everyone know that we're live, and if you want to join us on stage, just tap on the mic in the bottom left. Alexandre, I'll start with you. Do you have any questions for Alex?
Yeah, sorry, my mic was off. Yeah, it's great. So, question I kind of was looking at earlier. Obviously, there's a lot of turmoil right now, so that's maybe not the first question on people's mind, but I'm sure this will settle down at some point. Has anyone used Celsius products to like buy a house? Like, can you get a mortgage through Celsius, or I guess get a loan off your crypto buying house? Are you familiar with such a use case?
Yeah, Zach, you want to take that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing actually more and more users use their crypto as collateral to take a loan and buy real estate. This was a trend that kind of started in Miami last year, and we just had Digital Asset News. He did an entire video about him purchasing a property in Puerto Rico with a Celsius loan. So, absolutely, and to respond to that, we've extended the loan.
You're starting to break up a little bit there, Zach.
Oh, sorry about that. I just switched my audio. Yeah, we've extended the loan period so people have more confidence to borrow against those coins and can make longer term investments like a house or commercial property. But absolutely, you can do that. When you take a loan against your coins, that cash can get sent to your bank account, or you can take it as stable coin, and you can do whatever you want to do with those funds.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I know some companies have limits like $1 million or $500,000 or whatever. The Celsius largest loan was $100 million to a single counterparty, right? So we don't have any size limits. You want to buy the largest mansion in Florida, no problem. Just as long as you have enough Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, we'll work with you. So. And again, if you just want to use Bitcoin for a third of the mortgage or whatever, no problem either, right? So definitely, or you took a crypto.com loan and you need to refinance it in a hurry on the weekend, you can call us as well. We're open on a Saturday. You can call 1-866 HODL now and talk to any one of our agents. So again, I think more and more people obviously have this asset class, and it's just baffling to me that all the financial institutions today treat it like funny money, like monopoly money, right? So it's just really sad that we have to take their funny money, but they can't take our funny money.
That was brilliantly answered, and that's fantastic. Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Alexandre?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, we've been having people buy houses for years now. I remember hearing the first person like 2 years ago buy a house. On top of that, recently we had someone borrow against their assets to get their entire family out of Ukraine. I'll be covering that story soon. Thanks for.
It's huge. It's huge.
Go ahead.
And just to add to that, the let's say you sold your Bitcoin 2 years ago, and you bought that house. So the house prices did go up. I think they're up like 40% or something, or 50%. But Bitcoin is up probably 7 or 8 times, right? So if you took a loan against your Bitcoin, you're way ahead than if you sold the Bitcoin and bought a house and diversified into real estate, right? So obviously, when you take a loan against Bitcoin, you are creating leverage for yourself. So you shouldn't take too much, and you should calculate how much income do you have, and can you afford the mortgage, and how safe is your job and everything else. It's not like you should swing at the fences and buy real estate. But my point is that it's better, if you believe in the asset class, it's better to borrow against it, get those dollars. You can get those dollars from us at 1%. And obviously, again, you want to borrow right now, because when there's inflation, you want to be a borrower, because basically the money you're borrowing is depreciating faster than the interest that you're paying. Even if you're paying us, at 33%, I think it's 4% interest or something like that. The inflation is almost double that, right? So you're borrowing at less than the inflation rate. You're investing it hopefully in an asset that does keep up the value, or even runs ahead of inflation, and at the same time you still have your Bitcoin. So that is a very smart move if you can afford it. If you obviously, I see some people mortgage their homes and buy Bitcoin. That's not a good idea, but the reverse may work.
And just to add to that, some of you in the audience may be wondering, well, what would I use it for? I'm not thinking about a house, but many people have used it to purchase a car. Many people use it to pay off high interest rate credit card loans. I've seen that a lot. So if used properly, it can greatly benefit someone's financial situation. So I just wanted to give other people some other ideas on what Celsius loans are being used for.
Also, taking a 25 or 33% LTV, or loan to value loan, at the bottom of the market is obviously much safer than taking a 50% loan, LTV loan, at the top of the market. So you have to really think also about the waves the market goes at, and again, break those loans into multiples, right? Because you never know what the bottom of the market is. But at least, instead of doing one loan, you can do several smaller loans. That gives you that flexibility, that you'll have a better chance of hitting the bottom than just trying to bet everything on one transaction.
Walter, you're up next. And Alexandra, thanks for the question.
Thank you for this opportunity. My question is directed to Alex. Sorry, I'm kind of worried here. I'm Ukrainian, and even though I'm a relative safety of New York City, all of my family is still in Ukraine, and we have a trouble kind of evacuating a distant family from Kharkiv to Lviv, specifically, to a more safe place. And basically all of my friends are still there. Some of them are on the front lines right now. My personal friend, best friend from medical school, he was in Bakhmut in the field hospital. I actually lost contact with him recently. So it's like, actually, I don't want to phrase this, but it's sort of a plea for help, because actually, this crypto system, it actually helped a lot of Ukrainians. And specifically, I just wanted to point out one thing that directly helps Ukrainians on the ground. It's called, it's an NGO. It has been around for a while. It's former volunteers, paramedics, and ex-military veterans. They formed and bunched up to form this Comeback Alive, or Povernись Живым in Ukrainian. It's like the biggest volunteer NGO that helps directly with the relief effort right now, helps with the medical supplies, helps with the refugees. We actually rely upon them because we want to transfer part of the family first to Lviv, then maybe to Hungary, and maybe to Israel eventually. And also these guys from Comeback Alive, they help significantly with actually also gearing up Ukrainian volunteers and getting them, to fight essentially for survival. And actually some of my friends are being actually geared up by them as well. But most importantly, they helped personally part of my family already with the evacuation process. So it's like, why I mentioned them, because this system was kind of stalled after the the invasion started, like on the 24th, and we had a hard time helping Ukrainians. And actually, what come back alive was kind of utilizing effectively. They relied upon this cryptocurrency system, which was already in place, and they have amassed a significant amount of donations, which helped Ukrainians directly. And my suggestion, or maybe my idea, was, for example, right now PayPal has just a simple button of donation, and maybe Celsius could use Come Back Alive as an option, as a really credible option to help Ukrainians and help Ukraine's survival. Essentially, maybe you can just add it to the Celsius, and it could be useful for directly helping Ukrainians, because these guys, they operate on the very front, under the shelling, and they pull out people from the combat zone and help other people to not become some kind of cannon fodder, but be more or less geared up if they want it to be. So it's like a multi-pronged effort here, and they are directly tied to. They're not tied, but they cooperate with the Ukrainian government. They're probably the most legit Ukrainian NGO right there, and we kind of wholeheartedly want to support them. I personally have been doing this since the very first day, almost on 24/7 schedule, having barely any sleep. This is my alternative account. My main account is Walter Lack. It's tied to my profile. I'm doing these spaces. We were trying to provide the almost 24/7 net coverage of the events in Ukraine and everything that is going on. So it was just my suggestion and a sort of a plea of help. Maybe there is a way to kind of incorporate this as an option to donate, because it directly would help Ukrainians, literally directly. Again, these Come Back Alive guys, they rock, and they actually just save people's lives right now. So if there is an option, I could link their website here to the Nest, or I could link my stream as well. It's up to you. I don't insist. Or you can just look into my profile. It's linked in there. Again, they already saved a lot of lives, and if we get some help specifically to Come Back Alive, it will save Ukrainians and their lives, because I'm not sure where this is going to. It's probably gonna get really bad really soon. Sorry for being too emotional here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us. For those who don't know, on the call, I was born in the Ukraine, in Chernivtsi, and obviously still have family, and we had 3 employees there, 4 contractors that we managed to evacuate right before the war actually broke out. And we posted, if you haven't seen, we posted on our Twitter, both on the Celsius Twitter, but as well as my personal Twitter, several addresses. One was us collaborating with Ukrainian government. We're also attending an event here tomorrow in New York with government members, trying to, again, promote fundraising and other activities. And addresses that are Celsius addresses that will be focused more on humanitarian activities. Obviously, the Ukrainian government spend a lot of this money on buying arms, and some people just don't want to donate into buying arms. So we basically broke this into 2 separate things. So you can either it's not in the app itself. It's specific addresses that you can find on, again, either on my Twitter or on the Celsius Twitter. And happy to take a look at this NGO and add it to the list. Obviously, again, there's 2 million refugees already that left the Ukraine. These are people that imagine you having to leave your home like without any warning and not be able to take anything with you, only what you can carry, and go and live in a different country like overnight, right? Basically, very limited access to take money out of banks or be able to move or transport. So we're talking about something that most of us can't even comprehend, right? It's how can this be happening in 2022, right? So I agree with Walter that this, unfortunately, again, Putin is doing this for his glory, for his legacy, and he wants to die and have the history books write that he put together or tried to put together the Russian Empire, the USSR, the way it was when he was a KGB officer, and he could care less how many people died because of that. So I think the Ukrainian people, there's 40 million of them. We're not talking about a small country, right? It's Ukraine is larger than Texas, so 40 million people are just not going to stand for it, and they're willing to sacrifice their lives and fight for it. And that is just going to be two opposing forces grinding at each other for a very long period of time, right? So I agree. This is not a short or easy battle for either side, and unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of support to help the Ukrainian people win this battle. And what I see is Ukraine being divided into the west and the east, effectively, with kind of Putin dominating the eastern side, including Kiev, and some enclave or some part of the western part staying with the rebels, with the people who are trying to basically become the dissident government.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. Why I want to emphasize these guys? They personally helped part of my family to get out, and what I really want to emphasize, because they have been on since the very day one in there. They have been actually operating for almost 8 years, but they ramped up everything and expanded, obviously, because of this mess that started. And they literally operate close, if not on the front zone, under shelling, and they pull out civilians from those areas which are getting hit right now. So, my point is, time is of the essence here. We cannot squander time with big other organizations that might move in eventually, like Red Cross, or might not. It will take time, and these guys are on it literally right now. So that's why I believe it's kind of crucial here. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah, thanks, Walter. Thanks for coming up and sharing that with us. We'll look into it. Next up is Lloyd.
Hey guys, it's quite difficult to follow that. My question feels a bit insignificant from that, but hopefully those guys accept crypto as well as PayPal, and a lot of people from Celsius can probably donate much easier then. My question was more related to the kind of the surrounding topic today, with the kind of whole Bitcoin versus gold, and linking it back to the Celsius product. And basically just wondering, with the demand for gold perhaps increasing at the moment, given the current climate, is there any plans for the Celsius app to perhaps prioritize any of the gold tokens into the swap feature at all?
So first, for those who don't know, we support several gold tokens, so like Pax Gold and XAUT, which is the Tether Gold, as well as I think so CoinShares, gold, tokenized gold. So, and you can earn 5.5% yield in gold on gold, right? So, or in Cell Token, you'll earn something like 7% yield on gold, right? In Cell Token. So, so obviously, it's if you believe in gold, it's a great product, and I think gold should go up at least another 20 or 30% from here. So we're just seeing the beginning again, as these things escalate, more and more people are going to go into this safety asset, and yeah, it's a good idea to prioritize or add it to the swaps. So we just gotta talk to that team. I think I see Wasim on the call, so maybe Wasim, if you can reach out to Matt and see if they can add those as swap pairs, so we can enable that as well.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I noticed quite a lot of the exchanges, they tend to have quite high minimum withdrawal fees on things like PaxG, I guess because it's ERC20. So of course, if you've kind of got the swap functionality, of course you guys do brilliant on all the gas fee kind of benefits that we get and things like that. So yeah, having it in the swap, brilliant.
Yep.
Did that? Go ahead, Alex.
No, I'm just saying, Wasim just give you a high five. So looks like he's working on it.
Cool.
Did that conclude your thoughts up here, Lloyd?
Yeah. Cheers, Josh.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Parabolic, you're up next.
Hi, I want to say thank you for having this space and inviting me up to speak. I want to begin by saying that my thoughts are with everyone in Ukraine and those impacted most significantly by the conflict. And my question was related to the gold versus Bitcoin topic. And one of the 6 characteristics of money is portability. And I'd like to hear your thoughts, Alex, on this, and as well as other panelists if they want to jump in. If the narrative of Bitcoin being more portable than something such as gold, if that could maybe take hold more so in a situation where we see millions of people being displaced from their homes and taking refuge in other countries.
Well, the issue is less portability and the fact that you can't withdraw your money, right? So both in Russia and in the Ukraine, they have limits on how much you can take out. In Russia, I think it's like $20 a day, and Ukraine, many of the ATMs just don't work; they're empty, right? And no one is refilling them, and the banks are not really functioning the way they should be. So unless you bought the stuff ahead of time and you ran away and so on. You can use your Bitcoin effectively, but if you didn't, then you can't really go and buy it now and use that to leave the country or whatever. So also most merchants or vendors don't accept Bitcoin, right? So in Russia right now, Visa doesn't work, MasterCard doesn't work. Again, you can't do a wire transfer, you can't buy foreign currency, right? So so there's a black market, and you can buy things at a premium. I heard premium is like between 30 and 40% for Bitcoin in Russia right now. So if you did all that before, then you're in good shape and you can walk away. But basically the Bitcoin economy is just now being put together, right? It's just now kind of starting to evolve, and again, this is going to be a long conflict. So there's going to be a lot of basically Bitcoin based transactions happening over the next year or two. And again, obviously, it's not a good thing to leverage war, but here there are a lot of other alternatives, right? So I think Bitcoin is going to do well.
Thank you.
Parabolic, did that conclude your thoughts up here on stage?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, thanks for joining us. Jason, you're up next.
Thank you. My family is praying for Ukraine, Alex, and heart is heavy over that. If I can pivot off the macro and just go back to more of a Celsius topic, and I'll say with all due respect, Alex, me and everyone on this call holds you in extremely high regard, but I'm going to be frank and say that I was really bummed out on Friday with the yield cut on Bitcoin. And, it's just, understand it's high for if you have one Bitcoin, but if you have a multi-coin hodler, it's just, for me, since I've been here, it's just been kind of a downward ski slope in yield. And, you know, I was excited about the mining and maybe the cell deployment and other things. I asked, like a lot of people asked you many times, is this scalable? So it, you know, I mean, it has me thinking, should I look at staking? I mean, I don't see how the flywheel works to attract people that are big coin holders of Bitcoin. I mean, will it ever go back up, or is this the new normal?
Yeah, so look, I hear you. It's not like we enjoy lowering rates. You know, I earn less personally too, so it's not it's not helpful to you. It's not helpful to us. So we are adding a third tier, meaning the middle tier. So the first few Bitcoin are going to earn higher rate than what's published today. It's just needs to be developed. So I would say it's another 30 or 45 days before that launches. So that's going to fix some of the pain that you're going through. And, you know, we have to deploy additional strategies. And unfortunately for Bitcoin, it's not easy. It's not like ETH has a lot of, you know, it has DeFi, it has staking, you can use it for many, many different things. Bitcoin really has very few use cases, and they're either on or they're not. So right now, again, everybody's nervous, everybody's scared, and they're just not borrowing, right? The traditional guys, the institutions, even volume on exchanges, all that is down. And you can see that also in like Ethereum gas fees, right? I mean, they're down like something like 90%, right? So that tells you that the activity across the board is down because of this fear factor. So we have a few strategies. You know, we're going to be ramping them up in March and April, and those should consume substantial amount of Bitcoin for deployment, and that should help us raise some rates. So we're not it's not like we're happy about lowering rates, you know. So but Bitcoin is harder to deploy than other coins. And again, we waited, I think, longer than anybody else. You saw other people lowered their rates months ago, if not years ago, right? I think BlockFi lowered it like over a year ago. We waited as long as we could, and you know, we just can't lose money. Bitcoin is like more than half of our assets, so we can't lose money on Bitcoin. So we had to basically adjust the rate, and now we have to you know, basically bring up those strategies, new strategies to be able to raise the rates.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us up on stage, Jason. Next up is Cellcat.
Hi, sorry. I totally forgot what I was thinking of. I've just been listening to you guys, so continue. I'm sorry. I had a thought like an hour ago.
All good. Taylor, you're up next.
I thought cats had long memory. What happened there?
I think it's the lives. I've already used like 8 of them though, so I'm just huddling with Celsius now.
Well, I see Mark Moss on the call, so he always has a question or something smart to say. So make him a speaker.
I'll bring him up. Taylor, in the meantime, you're up next.
Cool. Thanks for having me up. I appreciate it. Yeah, I had a question for Alex. So when you all made created the business, I guess back in like 16 or 17, I don't know exactly when it was, and you deployed kind of the equity and then the cell token, did you ever envision on having, I think what we're missing in maybe traditional markets or even crypto markets is having like an equity with utility. So right now, if I go buy Tesla stock or whatever, there's no utility, so it's no different to me than buying some kind of crypto. So we have like a half and half right now where cell token has utility, but it's not equity. Did you ever envision something like that. Obviously, it's not built that way, but it would be kind of cool to have if businesses did that.
Well, we distribute the vast majority of what we create in yield every week to our community. It's not a dividend, but if we were a stock, it would be as if we paid a dividend every week, right? So if you think about it that way, then it is a stock with utility, right? If you would consider what's the equivalent, but we're not trying to be a stock. We're not trying to be again, the whole point is that normally the community / the users are the ones who are getting shafted because companies are trying to give everything to their shareholders, right? So if you look at banks or you look at almost every institution, you'll see that they're taking from their customers and they're giving to their shareholders, right? Very few companies have a business model in which the more the community succeeds, the more the banks suffer, right? Show me another business model where all of us win, we all charge institutions fees, and when we get paid, the banks suffer and complain and try to shut us down, right? So what we created is a very, very unique business model, right? So I'm less focused on, is it a security or is it a commodity or is it a token with a utility, and more focused on, okay, who benefits and who suffers, right? Who gets the vast majority of the spoils and who has to change their ways.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Taylor, that concludes your thoughts up here on stage.
Yep. Thanks, Josh.
All right, awesome. Thanks for joining us. Just a reminder to the group, please share the room out. Let everyone know that we're live here. And if you want to join us, just tap on the mic in the bottom left. Mark, welcome up to the stage.
Yeah, thanks,
Hi,
Josh.
guys. Thank you. Oh,
Yeah,
me?
thanks, Josh, and thanks, Alex. I saw gold and Bitcoin and what wins in this environment, so I had to jump in and see what you guys were talking about. So I'm kind of new to the room. I don't know exactly what you guys have been talking about, but sounds from like those last couple questions, potentially. I mean, obviously, the environment's full of Russia, Ukraine, some stuff that Alex definitely knows a few things about. Interesting that we have lots of sanctions going on with supposedly a new announcement coming out tomorrow with even more sanctions, potentially on cryptocurrencies that are regulated in the United States. I don't know how much Celsius and Alex could talk about that, if at all, or if you guys already talked about it. I'm sorry. Obviously, it's been an announcement for some time. Supposedly, there was a little bit of a leak from Janet Yellen today. Have you guys talked about that, or Alex? Is there any thing that you guys can talk about at this point?
Well, I'm actually flying to Washington tomorrow to meet some politicians there, so can't mention names, but it's definitely I mentioned that the Biden initiative has like 3 forks to it, and right, it's what he announced in the past related to the impact to our financial system and the environment and the CBDCs, but there's definitely there's probably going to be some kind of an extension towards stable coins. So we don't know the details. I don't know what you heard, but
I mean, I just saw there was a post that was up I saw a little while ago that said it looked like maybe it got released, an announcement got released a little bit earlier. I think at this point it looks kind of like what you said, some very vague language that talks about task force that will be looking into this more. We're going to be looking at what else we can do, sort of a thing, without a lot of teeth necessarily. But I saw stuff come out of Europe talking about blocking transactions to anonymous wallets of very, very small transactions and so forth. And of course, lots of regulations around the stable coins and stuff. So, it's a shame. I know, Alex, for you personally, kind of fighting against the telecom in the early days and bringing VoIP and really, freeing communication from the monopoly. And like we have a technology here right now that we can free people. I gave a talk last week and I talked about how there is no freedom without the freedom to transact because it sits at the base of everything. I don't have freedom of speech if I can't buy a computer or a phone to get on the internet. I don't have freedom to assemble if I can't pay for gas in my car to go assemble with people. And so we have this technology that can give us this freedom, and hopefully they don't encroach on it too hard. And if they do, I guess it's up to the people to kind of push back on that.
Well, I agree with you. I think they are probably going to extend the restrictions to stable coins and probably try to kind of cover USDT, USDC, all of the synthetic coins and so on, because if you're if you're trying to transact with some other country, you're going to use one of those to try to bypass the restrictions, right? Because none of those transactions go through SWIFT or go through any of the banking system, right? So it's going to be a challenge to monitor and restrict these things, and obviously it's much harder to restrict the synthetic coins than it is to restrict USDC or USDT. And OFAC already actually published a list of wallets that belong to oligarchs and people connected to Putin. So those are, at least in Celsius, they are blocked, and if you try to transact with any of those addresses, we'll block you. But we'll see what the efforts are and can they be enforced. Sometimes they publish things that cannot be technically actually done, and that creates a problem because as somebody who provides service, you try to enforce the rules, but you can't because what they told you is not really possible. So hopefully they're consulting with the right people to try to I'll add my 2 cents tomorrow. Let's put it that way. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and Mark, while you're up here with us, you're asking Alex what his thoughts are, but what are your thoughts on what's going on with Bitcoin here? Do you think there's more punishment to go? Do you think we've got some more downside?
Predicting the future, especially the near-term future, is very difficult. I would say, I feel more bullish than ever before for a number of reasons. So really, I've been talking about, and actually the IMF came out and called for a Bretton Woods 2 moment, which is a global reset of the financial system. But the last, 2 days, we've been seeing actually we're going into a Bretton Woods 3. So Bretton Woods 1 was the whole world resetting, going onto a commodity money. So an entire global system based off of gold. In 1971, when they closed the gold window, the US dollar came off the gold standard and all currencies thereby came off the gold standard. And we went to enter the age of fiat currency and treasuries. And so really they're called, that if that was Bretton Woods 2, now we have a fiat currency. Of course, treasuries are what they would call a risk-free asset. So holding US dollars or US treasuries was risk-free, supposedly. And we found out real quickly a couple of weeks ago in Canada that your money isn't safe. But even more importantly, one of 3 global superpowers with nukes had their bank accounts frozen. And so if they can do it to the Canadian truckers, and then they can do it to a global superpower with nukes, they can do it to anybody. And so we very quickly found that those risk-free assets are no longer risk-free. And at this point, Bretton Woods 3 is happening one way or another. And what does that mean? Well, we're ending the fiat currency stage and we're going back to a commodity-based money. And so that's why we see commodities going crazy right now. They had to halt nickel trading. I don't know if you guys saw that. Nickel was going up so fast they had to halt it. They're potentially going to be rolling back those transactions, and so that's not safe. You can't even hold your commodities. But gold is about to pop really hard. I mean, it already is over 2,000. It's small potatoes when you deal with us. When we're dealing in crypto, the numbers look very small, but it's important because of how big it is. And the gold contracts are going up so high that the banks can't deliver on them. And all it takes is one bank to miss a delivery, which looks like it's going to happen, and this whole system falls apart. So back to Bitcoin and being bullish, we very, very quickly found out that no country would ever hold their reserves in a fiat currency ever again. And nobody should ever hold reserves in a fiat currency again. And so everybody's scrambling to commodities. But of course, Bitcoin is similar to a commodity. Obviously, it's regulated by the futures exchange here in the United States, but it's similar to a commodity, and it's something that cannot be seized. And so, like gold, for example, they want to sanction Russians' gold, but Russia has the gold. Like the U.S. can't really sanction it. They could stop them from spending it. But Bitcoin is, of course, digital. So I think it's extremely bullish for Bitcoin. I think it's one of the most bullish things we could have ever seen. Of course, I was just asking Alex about the sanctions. I would expect those to continue to ratchet up. I don't think anybody on this call, at least if you've been around for a little while, nobody on this call would ever expect that we would separate money and state without a fight. So I would expect to see sanctions ratchet up, but I think it's inevitable. So potentially, if we see the markets really crash in a liquidity crisis, then we would probably see Bitcoin liquidate down, right? Just like we saw in March of 2020, just like we saw, in 2008 with gold. Anything with liquidity gets sold off in those moments, but it's what happens after that fact that's important. And so, yeah, I'm extremely bullish on Bitcoin at this point.
Yeah, and Russia is the world's largest producer of nickel and aluminum, and one of the world's largest producers of gold, right? So so when you basically tighten them up like this, it hurts the supply chain from beginning to end. They produce every commodity in the world, right? So all these embargoes and restrictions and so on are we already had problems with supply chains. Now we're going to have even greater problems, right? And when you have problems with supply chain, you have inflation. Why? Because the producers, the people that can still produce, can charge higher prices, right? It doesn't matter what Bernanke or Yellen or anybody else does, because they cannot unclog these. The opposite. The U.S. government is actually making it worse by fighting the good fight in the Ukraine, right? So we are, on one side, we are squeezing Russia, but on the other side, we're actually helping them by raising prices on the things that they make all their money on.
And that's a good point, Alex. And that's something that a lot of people really maybe haven't taken into consideration, is that what we've typically been looking at over the last year and a half is supply chain constraints from the kind of the producers, China producing the products and shipping them. But now what we're going to see is we're going to see supply chain problems from the suppliers, like coming from Russia, providing the raw materials that even go to get the stuff made. So way further up in the supply chain. A lot of disruptions that are going to come from this. And ultimately, though, I think this moment that we just witnessed last week is going to be the same moment as in 1971 when Richard Nixon closed the gold window. That's effectively what they did. They closed the FX window, and we just saw history being made, and it's going to happen real fast from here.
Alex, do you see a Bretton Woods moment actually happening? Like in these times that we're having, you actually see countries coming together, sitting down at the table, and then somehow Bitcoin being a part of that conversation?
Well, so, I mentioned this on February 22nd in my Kitco interview that the dollar is going to get much stronger, despite the fact that it's a fiat free-floating currency. There's nothing behind it, right? And it's because basically what happened is just extended the life of the dollar, right? So if we, the United States, were worried about the dollar being the reserve currency of the world and the fact that we printed 10 trillion, Europe just went into a recession, right? Maybe worse than that, maybe a depression, right? Because effectively, again, half of their energy comes from Russia. All of that is in question. Their input costs have gone up dramatically, both on energy and on commodities and everything else. and their currency is, if you have to make a choice, do I hold euros or do I hold dollars? You're gonna bet on dollars, right? So globally, the people that are siding with the West are gonna all buy dollars and treasuries, and that's why you're seeing the interest rates basically go down, because there's more demand for treasuries, right? And but you're seeing spreads increase dramatically, meaning the world becoming much more risky, and people are running for safety. I mean, yesterday, I don't know if you guys saw, but yesterday, Blackstone, which is one of the world's most reputable companies, lost 10% of its value in one day. That's like, I think, something like $40 billion in one day lost. And if you look at the volume was half of what it normally is, meaning it didn't go down because there was huge volume and people were buying and selling. There were just people selling, mostly selling, right? And very few buyers. So buyers were willing to come in at minus 10%, right, for one of the world's best companies. So why? Because they have leverage. They have a lot of loans, and people are worried, will a company like this be able to survive in this new world? So anyone with debt is being taken out to the shredders. Anyone with excess cash, like Apple, like others, is holding very well. And obviously gold is doing well, commodities are doing well, oil companies are doing well, but it's the market shifted like basically overnight. Like Mark was saying, the market moved from risk on to risk off, and I think again this fight in the Ukraine is going to be much longer than what everybody thinks. Everybody expected Russia to conquer Kiev in 3 or 4 days, right? And that's obviously not happening, right? And the more arms we're sending them, we, meaning the United States and Europe, the closer we're getting to a war, because we're frustrating Putin, right? We're sending all those anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles and just taking down his tanks and his helicopters and his planes. And he's going to wake up one day and say, hey, you guys are all fighting with me. I'm not just fighting the Ukraine, I'm fighting the West. And he may do something stupid, right? Beyond just trying to conquer the Ukraine. So just to deter the West from helping Ukrainians. So I think there's a pretty high chance here that this will escalate. And if it escalates, it's again, it's going to take the whole world into depression, right? Because it's an irreversible move, right? Then it's risk off, like in the freezer, not just in the refrigerator. So the next few weeks, I think, are very important to see if things de-escalate or escalate, and and that's why you're seeing again so much movement in the different markets. Everybody's trying to position themselves in case something really bad happens, and Bitcoin is holding very well. Again, it did not go like yesterday. Today the markets were trading sideways, so it's not really a good day. But yesterday, when the markets were very, it was all red, right, across the board. Bitcoin actually held pretty well. So it tells you that we are, again, volumes weren't high. So I think anyone who wanted to sell already sold. Yes, we may retest lower lows if something additional bad news comes out, either from Biden or from this regulation or from some action in the Ukraine. And, over the longer term, again, we here in the United States, we can ramp up our production of oil. So we should be able to push down oil prices, push down natural gas prices, because we can export a lot more natural gas to Europe and other places, Japan, and so on. So I think all of that is just we're gonna need 6 months to ramp it all up. And just like in Bretton Woods 1, the Mark was talking about, where everybody came to the United States to come to this agreement of tying all of the currencies to the dollar, and the dollar being tied to gold. I think everybody's coming to the United States right now for what's called swap lines, meaning all these countries are coming to the United States saying, hey, we need dollars. Will you lend us dollars? And the Fed will give swap lines to the friends of the United States. So if you're Germany, you'll get a swap line. You're South Africa, you're going to get a swap line. But if you're somebody who sided with China or sided with Russia, you're not going to get dollars, right? And again, the dollar is going to be the reserve currency, it still is. And if you don't have dollars, your economy is going to choke. It doesn't matter how big your economy is. China will not be able to run their economy on digital yuans because most people in the world are not going to accept those. So I think, yes, it's Bretton Woods 3, but it's deja vu all over again. It's basically what happened right after World War II.
Mark, did you have any further thoughts before I move on to the next guest?
And by the way, Mark did an amazing episode about the history of gold coins and gold in general, how it was used and debased throughout the different empires. So if you haven't watched it, if you want to understand the context of currencies and empires and the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and so on, Mark, maybe mention the name of the episode and where to find it.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I love history. I think it's when you understand how Bretton Woods or how the U.S. dollar took over the reserve from the British pound, for example, or how Bretton Woods came together. It kind of helps you see how this next one's going to unfold. I've done a lot of videos on that. I think I did one. Maybe you're talking about it's like when money dies or something like that. But the one thing I'd say, kind of back to the question that you'd asked, and Alex kind of talked about this kind of Bretton Woods 3. I don't necessarily see it as the whole world coming together, sitting down and agreeing to something like they did with Bretton Woods back in 44. Back in 44, they had a plan, and the whole world kind of came together on this system. The problem is right now is like the U.S. basically just torpedoed the entire system just last week, and like there's no system ready for this yet. The system really is to go into a CBD system that probably has 18 to 24 months to be ready at best, in my opinion. And so that system's not ready. Everyone's kind of scrambling in this kind of risk-off environment into this kind of commodity-based money, but of course the commodities aren't ready. So I think it's going to be a lot more chaotic and a lot more decentralized, where I've already made Bitcoin my reserve. We have Fortune 500 companies like MicroStrategy have made it their reserve. Alex said they're holding a huge chunk in Bitcoin. And then you have nation states like El Salvador on Bitcoin. So I think it's going to be a lot more decentralized. I don't see the whole world coming together. So definitely expect more turbulence moving forward.
Awesome. Well, you guys have given lots of good thoughts and feedback on this topic. I'm going to move on to the next person, but if anyone else wants to bring us back to the conversation had between Mark and Alex here, feel free to do so. All right, Other Mark, what's going on?
Hi, Josh. Thank you very much, and I apologize for stepping on Mr. Moss before. My name is Mark, too, obviously. First of all, thank you for everything Celsius does. Alex, I love Rami. He's my new favorite guy at Celsius. My kids and I live in a dream world because of you guys and your service, so I can never thank you enough. My question deals with the interest rate. It was a miracle and a blessing that it stayed above 3% for so long. Amazing work by you guys. Obviously, things go up and down. I'm wondering, is there a viable business model where a customer could lock in assets for a predetermined time, and I guess you'd say the resultant effect with that would be to get, say, a 3.5 and forego a 7.5 if that ever happens again. But it has been as high as that in the past. Is that something that could be viable if a customer is willing to lock in a rate and a predetermined amount of assets?
Yeah. So there are regulatory issues with basically promise you, let's say, 1 year worth of return. I think that's how BlockFi and other people got into trouble, because they started promising 1 year and 5 years and 10 years, and no one can promise you any of that. So that's why Celsius only like one of our principles is that we treat everybody equally. So everybody on this call who is using Celsius is earning exactly the same rate, including me, even though I have a few $100 million on the platform, versus somebody who may have $100. But in percentage terms, you're 1% of the pool, you earn 1% of the yield, right? So when we promise interest only 1 week at a time. So I mentioned before that we have several initiatives to improve the yield. So the yields are going to go up. We know that for sure. We're just adding that third tier to give people who have more than one Bitcoin and less than infinity, or less than 21 million, I would say, the ability to earn more, right? So that's coming. And by the way, I just posted on my Twitter talking about principles. Ray Dalio did a great video also of kind of like the history of empires. I covered that also in some of my lectures, on the lecture I did at MIT and other places, kind of showing the progression of how empires came to be, how they became the reserve currency, and how they lost it through debt and debasement. So I think, again, Mark, Ray Dalio, the stuff I did, all kind of tells you the same story. I think we all came to the same conclusions, and I was.
Well, all three of us are out of Burrow, guys. That's why, Alex.
Yes. So, but my point is that I was more negative on the U.S. dollar up until the last 2 weeks. I'm basically changing my tune a little bit and saying that the U.S. just got and the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency just got an extension on life, and at least another 10 or 15 years beyond what it would have been otherwise. Because in my view, again, this is a rare moment of disagreeing with Mark. Usually we're going to agree on everything, but the U.S. did put together a very broad coalition, not just of European countries, but many other countries. And this coalition, part of this coalition is the promise of these swap lines based on the U.S. dollar. So the way we got the world to do our bidding here, and we basically weaponized the dollar, is by promising these swap lines that are lifelines to countries now around the world. There are countries around the world that don't have dollars to buy gasoline for their countries. Okay, and if you don't believe me, just go on Twitter, go on Reddit, and see posts from all over the world with empty gas stations. And it's not because the supply chains, because the countries can't afford, they don't have dollars to pay to buy gasoline or buy oil for their refineries. So what we're saying is, again, people who are tied to the United States are going to get through this, and people who are not tied to the United States are going to suffer through these huge increases in prices, and they're going to have to ration, and they're going to have to do a lot of things that we Americans just not used to, right? We used to have abundance of everything. And again, the United States produces more oil and more gas than we consume. We're a net exporter of oil and gas, right? And we were the world's largest producer. So we're not going to have any problems. So I'm just saying that other people, that's what happened in World War II, right? Well, why did we become the reserve currency? Because everybody needed to buy weapons from us, needed to buy commodities from us. They were at war, we were not. They all paid us in dollars, in gold, sorry. And when the war ended, the United States had something like 70% of all the gold on the planet in its coffers, right? So part of it was because people like France and others felt that the only safe place for them before the Nazis invaded was to ship the gold to the United States, and part of it was because they paid for these for all the stuff they bought from us, including weapons and planes and everything else. So the same thing is happening now. It's just this time it's commodities. Try to buy wheat, try to buy oil, try to buy nickel, right? Suddenly everything is 2 or 3 times more expensive. So and you need dollars to transact in all these things. The U.S. has a magic printing press, and everybody else doesn't. So, and that is a very, very powerful position that we're in.
Mark, did that help to answer your question?
Yes, it did. Always fair, always letting us know what's going on. Total transparency. Alex, again, I appreciate everything you and Celsius do for my family. Thanks again.
Thanks for joining us. Next up is FC.
Thanks, Josh. I got a couple questions. Alex, I'm just curious. I know you don't know what's going on with this regulation, but just your gut feeling. Do you see an outright Bitcoin ban? Or, do you see this regulation helping, like, for example, Grayscale get an ETF?
Well, look, if you're a politician, you do not get reelected if you're going against crypto. Okay, you just don't get reelected, right? So crypto is not left or right. Crypto is not the coast or the flyover country. It's everything. It's everybody. It's everywhere. So it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat, and you can see that with mayors. You can see it with governors, right? People that don't know what Bitcoin is, talking about Bitcoin and getting their salary in Bitcoin. So I see basically zero chance that Bitcoin gets banned in the United States or even in Canada. All right. So now, are there going to be regulations? Yes. Are there going to be ways that the government is going to put their hands around all of this and make sure they get their taxes and they get they can block transactions, they can monitor everything, and they'll know everything? Yes, all of that is coming. But I just don't see a ban. And GBTC is Gensler does not want a ETF, right? Gensler wants to become a Treasury Secretary. He's waiting for Janet Yellen to retire. He wants that job. And as long as he's not issuing an ETF, his chances of getting to that position are higher than if he issues an ETF and then something crazy happens, right? Something bad happens to Bitcoin and then they blame him. So not issuing an ETF is a safer bet for him, safer way for him to move up the political ladder. And I don't see him issuing that anytime soon.
All right, and one other question. You mentioned earlier about them maybe targeting stablecoins with this regulation. So, say for example, I have USDC on a MetaMask or a Trust Wallet, and I send it to my Coinbase debit card, right? Say like $20 to make a purchase for lunch, right? Does that get reported? Is that a taxable event? And do you think they're gonna, if they target the stable coins, is that gonna make all these crypto cards basically useless?
Well, when they're talking about monitoring or restricting stablecoins, they're not trying to take them away from you. It's not about confiscation, right? That would violate the Constitution, and they're going to lose in court, and anything they do will be reversed. So they're just talking about the ability to monitor transactions and block transactions. And if they need to confiscate somebody from a criminal or from a thief or from a hack, and they want to be able to have the tools to do that, right? So again, I'm not a tax advisor, but when you move stable coins, that is not a taxable event. The taxable event is only when you're selling from a commodity, from Bitcoin or Ethereum, into a stable coin, and your cost basis is lower than what you bought it at. So moving stable coins is not a taxable event.
All right.
In most cases.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it.
Did that conclude your thoughts, FC?
Yes, sir. Have a good night, everyone.
You too. Thanks for joining us. Lucia, you're up next.
Hey, everybody. Boy, I tell you. Oh, God. Oh, I mentioned in my testimonial how I got to retire, because of Celsius. And thank you, Alex, for everything you do. And now I'm sitting here thinking I should go back to work. I was a psychotherapist for 32 years, and I'm sitting here thinking there's a lot of stress going on for valid reasons.
Lucia, you're cutting really, really bad.
I'm cutting okay.
Maybe try to get to a better spot, and I'll circle back around to you.
Awesome. I will.
All right. Sorry about that.
No worries.
JKT or JQT, VC Network.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go for it.
Gotcha. Hey, thanks for having me. Hey, Alex, Zach, everybody. Alex, a quick question, if I may. Back to FC, when he was asking about stable coins. What are your thoughts with the Tether controversial FUD, however we want to view it? With that situation, do you see any risk in the future or the near future with Tether, which then could affect the long-term price of Bitcoin? Thank you.
Yeah. So, look, Tether has been around. It's the longest stablecoin in existence, right? There's about 80 billion issued. It's in circulation. It has 20 something times velocity. Its velocity of Tether is 20 times greater than the velocity of the US dollar, meaning it's really the blood of the crypto space. If you look at the pairs that have the most volume on any exchange, it's always Tether Bitcoin, Tether Ethereum, and so on and so on. So definitely, if something happens to Tether, bad things happen to Bitcoin and Ethereum, because panic will ensue and liquidity will dry up, and so on and so on, right? So I definitely think Tether is important, but I don't see any issues with Tether. I know a lot of people keep spreading FUD and problems and this and that. I can tell you that again, Tether has been investigated so many times, right? The CFTC and SEC and the Southern District and states and foreign governments and this and that. And every time, after years of investigation, sometimes they got a fine, sometimes they didn't get anything, but nothing, right? And this is after full disclosure. When a regulator calls you and says, "Hey, send me all the information," you send them all the information. So I think if there was anything to worry about, it would have come up already. Now, it's true that people continue to spread FUD about Tether. I just don't see any substance to it, right? I just don't see any, where is the truth? Where is all of this coming from? So I can see why banks would be jealous and upset and trying to kill this thing. So probably they are the source. But I just don't see. Again, the Southern District was digging through I think it was 16,000 documents or something. Some crazy number. You can look it up on Google. And whatever, they investigated for I think 2.5 years, right? And nothing. Not a lawsuit filed, no injunction, no penalty, nothing, right? So maybe there was a penalty, but again, if there was any smoking gun there, they would have found it. That's all I can say.
Totally with you on there. Just a quick follow-up. In terms of the backing of Tether, which they have some China commercial paper. Recent data shows that China commercial paper debts are surging. Might get worse with the current war between, obviously, Russia and Ukraine. Any thoughts on that may shake the grounds of Tether? Thank you again, and that's all I have today.
Yeah, so I think they publish their attestations every month or every quarter, right, Tether? And you can see what actually is backing that $80 billion. But I think, again, most of this is issued currency. So this is it's not a loan or somebody brought an asset and then took Tether instead, right? Swapped it for Tether. And So basically, if they want to, it's not like you took a loan and you're paying down the loan, right? It's not the same thing. So the people that bought this tether basically exchanged either dollars or fiat currency for the tether or some other asset, right? So if there's a run on a bank, does Tether have all the assets to take back all the people that want redemption from Tether? That's really the question you're asking. And again, I believe there are attestations, but I can't tell you that it's true or not true, and if they have the assets or don't have the assets, right? It's not. I can't. I don't know. I mean, I'm not Tether, and I can't speak on their behalf.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Josh.
Yep. Thanks for joining us up on stage here, VC Network. Next up, I'll go to Otis, and then I'll circle back around to Lucia and see if she's got better signal.
Thanks, Josh. Mark, you're one of the first interviews that I listened to in, I think, June 2019 when I was in my middle of my Celsius research. And I know that you like dirt bikes. I think Alex was in California at the Bitcoin conference in San Francisco. So great interview. I don't know if you remember it, but great interview. Alex, my question for you, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, of course I remember that. Alex and I both share a love for dirt bikes. And one of these days, Alex, I'm going to get him down into Mexico. We're going to do some stuff together. So
Baja,
course,
California, I think is what I remember the destination that Alex promised you. He's still in go.
I think
we'll get him there one day.
Yeah, Mark is afraid that I only talk about riding bikes, but I can't ride a bike. So he's afraid, like, take me out into the dirt and get me. He thinks, well, Alex is going to hurt himself. Then everybody's going to be blaming me for breaking his legs or something. I can hold my own. I'll send you a video of me on a dirt bike so you can feel comfortable taking me to Baja, you know.
Yeah, I don't want all the Celsians mad at me here.
It's what makes him happy, and he needs the vacation anyway. Take him, Mark. Anyway,
Mark, I did Lima to Machu Picchu, right? That's was it 1,800 miles or something? 9 days, all dirt roads through the desert on the XR250.
That's awesome. We're gonna line it up. We're gonna get it done.
All right.
All right, Alex. My question is about the XRP lawsuit. There's been whispers that Hester Pierce and the SEC staff believe strongly that they're going to lose that case, meaning the plaintiff, the SEC, is going to lose it and Ripple is going to win it. Can you please explain to us the pros and cons? What happens if XRP wins that case? Is that now the new Howey test? And will Celsius be available to all U.S. members if that happens?
Well, the fight between the SEC and the XRP is over is XRP a security. It's not about the Howey test. We're not revisiting the Howey test. We're just fighting the founders of XRP. Well, the founders, because they're really suing the people, and the SEC are arguing over whether these tokens issued or coins issued were securities or not securities, and it's not an easy decision because XRP never did an ICO, right? They never actually issued these to the users, right? So directly. So obviously the outcome of this case will dictate how the SEC treats the other more than 100 tokens that they went after, right? Because they basically, I think, issued over 100 letters to all kind of different people telling them, hey, we think what you're selling is a security. Celsius is in a little bit different situation since we, again, filed a Reg D and we only went to accredited investors and we kind of treated that it may be a security since the beginning. We don't know if it is or isn't, and until somebody tells us, we're treating it as if it is. So the XRP winning or not winning doesn't really affect our state, because we're not waiting for a resolution, right? We just we found a way to operate. I think everybody's happy with it, and so we're not suddenly after. If XRP wins, we're suddenly going to decide to be cowboys and risk everything, hoping that we'll also win some case against the SEC. So I think XRP is a unique case. And again, it relates to, I think, stuff that happened in 2014 or something, right? So obviously a lot of things happened since, and there's much more clarity right now on many, many things. So, I'm not sure that a resolution there kind of changes a lot about Celsius.
How long do you think we have to wait for the SEC to decide? I mean, are we talking 1 year, the next administration, 5 years before Americans can get access to sell?
Well, I think what the Biden administration is doing, this decree that he just signed, is asking for exactly that. Is basically saying, okay, Treasury, okay, the Fed, okay, other agencies, the EPA, right? Come and tell me what I should do that would be in the best interest of the United States of America, right? And in the best interest of the US dollar.
Shows you again that politicians don't run the world, the bankers do. But continue.
Yeah, but again, that is good for Celsius. Again, we build bridges and roads in crypto, right? On the blockchain. We're not issuing our own blockchain. We're not issuing our own stable coins. So for us, clarity for all of these different assets is a good thing. So for us, it's a catalyst. Again, more users equals more assets, equals more yield, equals more people earning and sell. So we win no matter what, right? So I'm not trying to win against the SEC. Like it doesn't help me if Ripple wins against the SEC. You understand? So we want to build roads and bridges between the 200 blockchains that exist. There might be 200 CBDCs tomorrow, and we'll support all of them. We're not against CBDCs. We're not against even like JP Morgan has a crypto quorum, right? We're not against that either, right? So a lot of people think like, oh, you have to side with this guy or that guy. We don't. We're focused on providing liquidity and enabling. If you looked at Celsius X, of what we've done there, right? We bridged the Doge blockchain with Cardano blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain, and the Polygon blockchain. First time anyone has ever done that, right? 4 blockchains now working together. You can move any asset from and to instantly without any fees. You instantly mint stuff between 4 different blockchains, right? And earn yield and take a loan and do all kind of other stuff. So imagine that across 200 blockchains or 2,000 blockchains.
All right, thank you for that answer. And finally, any update on the fiat on-ramp? Or a lot of people I know are waiting on that.
Yeah, so we did have a release, I think today, right? On the new version that has a lot of improvements there, and so you should try that out. Make sure you update your app, and you'll see.
I was gonna say iPhone or Android comes first. I think Android comes first.
I think iPhone. Yeah, I think iPhone normally comes first, but we also in today's release there's a bunch of other things that we're adding, but it's not the full on ramps that I talked about. So for that, we're still waiting for some stuff. And again, this is more like regulation / permits and things like that, right? So the minute that's out, you'll have no double KYC, no extra again, Wasim is on, so he can talk more specifics if you want to hear the details of. Or Zach, I don't know. Do you guys know the latest on this release? Like, what's the new bells and whistles?
Probably Wasim would be the best to talk about Fiat Gateway.
Right, gotta upgrade him. He's still a listener, so.
I'll invite him up. But in the meantime, Otis, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, Wasim, go for it.
Sure. So the release, I don't know if Android or iOS went out first, Otis, to your point, but it's for direct into USDC on ramps. So from within the native Celsius interface, you'll be able to link your card or your bank and purchase crypto that way. I think it's limited initially to like 5 or so states. And the reason we did it this way is so that you can use the Celsius swaps as the like source of liquidity into something like Bitcoin or ETH if you want to make the purchase. So right now, like if you want to go through that flow and purchase Bitcoin, you would first on ramp dollars and then swap dollars to Bitcoin. Eventually, we'll obfuscate the need for those 2 steps. But the point was that this way users can use Celsius's liquidity to buy coins, which should be, I think, like I was doing the check against Coinbase not too long ago, somewhere around 3% better price than what like a normal retail user gets on something like Coinbase.
3% better. Wow, that's a lot. That's like and about the previous question was about adding gold tokens to the swaps. That shouldn't be too hard, right?
Yeah, I gave the little what I tried to do of a thumbs up on the room down here, but I messaged the team behind it. They're going to get it confirmed with risk, and then so long as our liquidity providers have access to the token, which they should, we can get that added as a pair against USDC pretty quickly.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the update, Wasim. Appreciate it. Feel free to stick around in case we get any more questions. Otis, you said you're good to go, right?
Yes, I'm good to go. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Lucia, have you gotten to a better spot?
I hope so. How's this sound? Sound better?
Yeah, it's a little bit choppy, but go for it.
Okay, real quick, I just wanted to give another update, a light thing, and that is today is International Women's Day. And over on another Twitter space right now, Women of the World Wide Web, Web3, is having a 24-hour Twitter space for people to listen in and contribute to how to get more women in the space. And there's a link if you want to go after our meeting here, go to my Twitter feed and you can click over from there. And they're going on till midnight California time. So there you go. That's it.
All right. Thank you for that, Lucia. Appreciate that. Next up, I think we got Inferno. What's going on?
Hi, just want to again, Alex and the whole team. You guys are amazing. I'm Platinum here in Los Angeles. I've been with Celsius since 17 cents. Celsius is changing my life. Just got a quick question. I know that there's a lot going on. It's about 7:30 here in LA, and I haven't received my rewards email yet. So just wondering if I should be concerned, you guys think, or just chill out.
Did you check your spam and your wallet? There's nothing in the wallet?
Yeah, I checked the wallet and I checked my spam because I always get, my email and I get my text. And I'm like, oh, nice. And it's been later and later, which is fine. I don't mind if it's late. But I figure 7:30, I got me a little bit because it's never
in your wallet. Did you check last yield that you received? It should be dated for last Friday, which was the 4th. So take a look in your wallet right now and see if you have a yield from the 4th. And if not, then you can email me, Zach@Celsius.network, and I can take a look in the back and see what took place.
It is. I'm seeing it right now. It says BTC reward March 3rd. So I guess that's.
Yeah, that's it. So, because all of our rewards date back to Thursday or Friday, depending on your time zone, and then they're credited on Monday. But yeah, so it looks like you did receive that reward. For some reason, the notifications just didn't appear.
Okay, I apologize if I was off topic, but I was just curious. But man, thank you guys again. This
Well,
team,
now
tireless
you have
life.
to donate it to the Ukraine. You know, like your false alarm means you're donating it to the Ukraine. Yeah.
You know what? I can subscribe to that. Yeah. Thank you again for everything. I'm going to continue.
Yeah, and that's what these rooms are for, Inferno. You know, so glad you're taking advantage of these and coming in and getting your question answered. Cellcat, you're up next.
Hey, sorry, I remember what I was trying to say before. I think the world's in we're in dark times, but I do think that in dark times, that's when the most incredible things are created, and that's when the best communities are formed. I just want to give you guys huge props on the Celsius Ambassador Program. I'm an ambassador again. I am so excited, and I want to scream it from the rooftop. So I'm going to be telling everybody, hey, if you were on the fence, if you were, hesitant, got to give up to Celsius. The criticisms that I had, this whole thing is, it was good before, but it's exactly what I kind of envisioned. Whereas just you show up, you say, I'm ready to go. I want to spread the word of Celsius. And that's what it's all about. So if you were on the fence, you guys, just to anyone in this room, go and check it out. If you're a passionate Celsian, there's going to be so many people in your life that are going to come up to you and say, I don't know what to do in these crypto markets. I don't know where to put my money. I don't know where to hodl. I don't even know what hodling is, right? Like, there's so many people with so many questions. And if you feel that fire in you to unbank the world, do what Celsius is all about, don't let that be. Don't let the idea of I don't know if this ambassador program, it's solid, it's awesome. I want to see that group. I want to see it add a couple extra zeros. So, let's make that happen, you guys. Just trying to give you guys some, bullish stuff in here. I know it's dark times, but I think this community is so strong, and it's incredible.
Thanks for that, Cellcat. And we listen to the community. It starts from Alex and rolls downhill, and in the ambassador program, we listened to what the community wanted and the best ways to help the community. We listened, and that's the result that you found there. So thank you for your excitement. We appreciate that. And glad the stray cat has come back home.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah. So again, I painted a pretty bleak scenario before. That the way to be ready and prepared for everything is to imagine the worst, and then you're ready for every other scenario, right? So obviously, it doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. I was just sharing with you kind of what's kind of the worst thing that can happen, and what are the consequences of that. And either you agree or disagree, but obviously we all, I think everybody on this call wants a quick and immediate resolution in the Ukraine, and if that happened, obviously everything is going to be great. But you have to be ready for the worst case scenario. So, and separately on this ambassador program, again, we're always looking to add more ambassadors. We help you create content, help you with promoting Celsius, educating people about what we do. And Scott runs that program, and he can help you both financially and from kind of a guidance standpoint. And we have several thousand ambassadors out there. Each one's producing his own thing, like his own way of getting the word out. So definitely don't feel if you feel like you think this is a good message, doing good, then doing well. We obviously helped a lot of people, and we're looking for more volunteers to kind of come and help us spread the word.
I just wanted to say too, I cut up my credit card and took out a Celsius loan instead. So not financial advice, but I am bullish, and I'm here for my family too. They're coming to me and they're saying, you know, tell me about this Bitcoin stuff, because I don't want to be holding these dollars no more. And I'm just like, I'm bringing them over to Celsius. So don't you guys, if you're listening to this, right? It's not about stacking those credit cards no more. We gotta get rid of that stuff. It's just a bad habit.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us up here on stage, Cellcap. Todd, you're up next.
Hey, Josh, Zach, Scott, Washim, and Alex. So I started my day today with participating in the International Women's Day and jumped on a few webinars, AMAs, and spaces for NFTs for women or with women. And I was wondering about, and by the way, the women's community in NFTs is amazing. And I encourage all of you to jump on board. So kind of have a couple, two things, I guess, which is what is Celsius doing with NFTs? And then I typically get on these every week. And on your executive AMA board, there's no women. So I would love to see or have another perspective from the usual group of Celsian woman on the AMAs. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all Zach's fault. So he's dominating that position, you know.
Come on, Zach.
You know, but
well,
we
you know, I live in Colorado, so we have a place here.
Yeah. So we always bring women to our shows. I mean, we have a lot of episodes with the women of Celsius, and but we should definitely do more. So maybe we'll send Zach on a sabbatical. We'll get him a world tour and replace him with you know.
COO and a bunch of other senior leadership are all women. The person who runs like all of our BD efforts is a woman. So like I think maybe you know we're like a bunch of geeks on a call at 10:30 p.m. Maybe weird subset of people. But yeah, it's just to your point, like Celsius leadership is inclusive.
Oh,
Definitely.
this is not a knock on Celsius leadership. I'm just saying that weekly, when I'm on these calls, there's very few women from Celsius on these calls.
Yeah, but I believe I saw on the schedule for the next coming few weeks there's going to be
Yeah, I
women
think he's
guests for
referring to
the.
these Tuesday nights specifically, which I would agree. You know, and generally we don't have
Oh,
any other guests on the AMA for sure. We've had Tranchetta, we've had Ashley, we've had or Kristen back in the day. A lot of that, but on these Tuesday night shows, I would say we generally don't have as many guests, and it's free to come. Like we always invite everybody to join. Tal joins a lot as well. But yeah, we'll see if we can invite other parts of the company to join us tonight.
I appreciate that. And again, I will restate this one more time. You should not have a woman as a guest. They should be part of this group.
Yeah, I mean, of course, everybody's welcome here. You know, nobody's excluding anybody. And again, we'll try to reach out to maybe be a little more invitational.
any other thoughts up here on stage, Todd?
Yeah, what's going on with Celsius NFTs?
sure, Alex, are you able to touch on that, or are we still waiting?
We're still waiting to make an announcement, so no announcements yet, but it's coming.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks for joining us, Todd. Next up is BeeryX.
Oh, hey guys, how are we doing? How's everybody doing today? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Awesome. Let me see if I can put my thoughts straight for this question. This question is kind of related to stable coins, and for those of us who are now earning a paycheck in stable coins, right? I wanted to see if Alex can help us understand a little bit more, kind of like the tax implications of this, right? I recently just was able to fulfill one of my dreams of transitioning full time into Web3. And it so happens that I'm going to start being paid in crypto, right? So I wanted to see if you can help me understand a little bit, how this would work, versus the standard kind of legacy, process of being paid in fiat. Does that make sense? What are the difference? How to move this money to pay for services and for rent and food and all that stuff.
You'll like the difference is like largely just in like the asset itself. So sometimes if you're getting paid in like ETH or Bitcoin, the value is moving up and down, right, relative to the expenses that you have, which are all dollar denominated
and fixed. Correct.
And then you also have the issue of the rail. So even if you move into like USDC to pay your rent, you can't necessarily pay your rent in USDC.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do, because like I'm also earning Celsius interest, like I have other like DeFi deployments, I'm earning a return in crypto. But if I want to use any of that in the real world, I have to do one of two things. Either one, off ramp it, so move it into my bank and then make my payment through my bank. Or recently I got a FTX debit card. There's also a Coinbase debit card where you can move funds onto the debit card in USDC and spend that to cover your rent. I will say that'll differ from like the intended Celsius credit product where you're paying on credit and then you pay that off with your crypto returns. But that doesn't exist yet. So your options are these debit programs, one of which is again with FTX, and then the other one is with Coinbase. Those are the two that I also have.
Yeah, so basically, there's definitely a need to go through the exchange and then through the bank account. I have another question kind of related with that, if you guys don't mind. When on-ramps and off-ramps finally become a reality, are those going to happen simultaneously, or is there maybe a possibility that one happens before the other one?
It's on ramps first, and then off ramps will follow.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much, Wasim. And have a great night, guys.
Thanks for coming up, BeeryX. Legend, you're up next.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me on. This is for Alex, kind of a philosophical question, but I'm just wondering what your take is on the dichotomy between, the centralized financial services, crypto, CeFi, being like, major hubs and custodians of like large, swaths of cryptocurrency, and how that differs from the original ethos of Bitcoin being like, mostly distributed, decentralized in the hands of the users directly. And as a corollary to that question, like where do you think Celsius stands in relation policy-wise to the other centralized financial institutions like Coinbase and Binance and all that, as it particularly applies to some of the government crackdowns happening, like blacklisting wallets and whatnot. And thanks for having me.
Well, so if you think about let's say 100 million people hold Bitcoin. Do these 100 million people want institutions to hold Bitcoin also, or they just want it to be held by retail guys? So basically, the more people hold Bitcoin, the more institutions hold Bitcoin, the higher the value. So think of it as a bus ride, right? And every person that gets on the bus has to pay a higher ticket, right? So the first person pays a penny, and the second person pays 2 pennies, and the next one 4 pennies, right? Well, now the institution showed up, and the ticket to get on the bus is $45,000, right? The first guy on the bus paid a penny, right? So do you want institutions on the bus, or do you want just a bus for people who paid a penny? You understand? So I think if you think about it as a mass adoption, right, from the concept that, okay, retail got in first, retail is gonna benefit the most. The people that hodl the most are gonna earn the most, because as more and more institutions and banks and finance people come in, they're gonna pay higher and higher prices in a world that is inflationary, and there's no other alternative. Very, very few things are going to do as good as Bitcoin or other crypto assets, right? So from that perspective, even Satoshi, I think, doesn't care if all these guys that we kind of maybe dislike join the party as well, as long as they pay retail for it. That's what they usually do to us, right? They invest in Uber or in Coinbase at 2 cents a share, and then they sell it to us at $60 a share. Well, now we're doing it to them. So do you want them to pay you $60 a share, or do you want to exclude them from the party?
Well, I completely agree with you there. I don't think there's any denying that, in order for mass adoption to occur, we need to have centralized hubs for to deal with institutions, especially, and just to deal with the massive onslaught of the entire world coming in and not understanding what self custody is and whatnot. But I guess my question was more pointed to the reality that can that the reality that having these centralized hubs creates a way for the government to be able to force policy through to massive swaths of people. And I was just wondering what your stance is on that, if you have one, and how it compares to some of the other centralized financial institutions.
So our job at Celsius is to build roads and bridges to TradFi, traditional finance, right? Because again, if you want to bring billions and tens of billions of dollars from these guys into crypto, these institutions have to make sure that, okay, there's no Russian oligarch there that they're buying coins from, that there's no monkey business going on in DeFi, there's no hacker or some scammer that they're transacting with, right? So part of what we do is in building these bridges is also verify that all the transaction, everybody you're transacting with is a good actor, right? We do KYC on everybody, we do AML, we monitor for bad activity, we check all the addresses in real time across the board, right? Constantly, right? We have, I think, close to 40 people just in our security department, which does all these things that I just mentioned, right, around the clock. So those are the things that give these institutions comfort. Now, it's the same thing that give governments comfort as well. Like if we couldn't do any of these things, Biden would be writing a very different decree than what he's signing this week, right? So instead of saying, hey, let's figure out how to use blockchain to extend the United States of America, he would be writing something that says, hey, figure out how to shut all this thing down, right? So I think we're not anti-government at Celsius. It's not like we might be anti-banks, but we're not anti-government, right? So the government represents the people. We might be frustrated, we might not be happy with our representation, but they're representing us. They're not representing the banks. It feels like it, but banks are not the ones voting to elect our leaders, right? Everybody on this call votes to elect our leaders. So we can blame everybody else, but really we can only blame ourselves for the leaders we have, and right.
Well,
I'm giving you a republic if you can keep it, right? Those are the words. Can you keep it?
Yeah, I didn't want to come across like I was anti-government. I'm definitely not, and I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I just to use some, like, I don't want to sound accusatory too, because I'm very grateful, and I'm like I've been in the space a long time, and I think you guys are doing a great job. I just wondered, like, you say you're anti-bank, but like in effect, like yourself and like Coinbase and all the other guys who are, again, I could sing praises all day, but effectively you guys are you are giant banks at this point. Like you're holding tons of currency.
Let's unpack that. So what do banks do? Let's describe the business of a bank. What is a bank?
They intake assets, and then they create money markets, basically, or they lend and borrow in order to create profits for themselves and then distribute it to the people that have provided them assets. And I understand that you guys.
No. Wait. You got the last piece completely wrong. Who do they distribute all their profits to? They don't distribute it to the people who gave them the assets.
Well, okay. I thought you meant in theory. Yes, traditional banks are raping everybody. Basically, you guys have set a mission statement.
Wait. But that's what it's all about. Like that little difference is the whole world. So banks do everything you mentioned, and then they take the profits and give it to their shareholders. They don't give it to the people who gave them the money. That's the whole problem. So
I understand that.
So if banks gave it to their customers, then Celsius wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be need for Celsius, right? All Celsius is doing is saying, look, enough is enough, okay? Taking our money, giving it to other people who every 10 or 15 years blow up and no one goes to jail and no one pays anything and no one has any penalties, and they get record bonuses the year after. That's why I said, look at the first block on blockchain. What is Satoshi screaming about? What is he or she? Today's Women's Day, so it's definitely Satoshi is female today for sure. What is she screaming about?
Bailout of banks once again.
Exactly. They
every 10 years,
took all of our money. They risked all of our capital, and they get bailed out and they get record bonuses. Why? Because there's no moral hazard. There's nothing, right? So Celsius is definitely not becoming a bank. We are the opposite of that. We're distributed $1 billion to the community. How much did the Celsius shareholders get since the company was founded?
Okay, Alex, your mission statement, I've listened to you speak many times.
I'm asking a simple question, right? Look, JP Morgan distributed, I think, $20 billion last quarter to their shareholders.
Yeah, they're doing nothing compared to you guys. I completely understand.
But that's it. There's nothing else. That's the only purpose we have.
I understand, but you're missing.
So how much? I'm asking you a simple question. How much did the Celsius shareholders get since the company was founded?
I know it's much more compared to traditional finance, and I commend you for that. I'm not actually
talking about the shareholders, not the Celsius.
Oh, the shareholders? I don't know.
Nothing, zero.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay.
So it's a complete opposite. It's a complete opposite, right, of banks.
Except for that it is a large collection of funds that are custodied, right?
Hey, Legend.
Yeah.
So you're not wrong in that Celsius is a centralized manager of assets, right? That is the way that the company is able to derive its yield that it then pays to the users, right? Which is no different from how any kind of financial institution functions. And then if you're a DeFi purist, you'll come around and say, hey, I don't want to trust with an entity. I'd rather trust with a protocol, right? And that's the trade-off that you make. So in the case of Celsius, yes, people are coming here and trusting an institution. We have risk policies and protocols in place that mitigate some of the things that we are able and unable to do. which is effectively how a compliant financial entity would work, right? But again, if you're looking for something that doesn't fall into that category, then you can look at things like DeFi, like Compound Protocol or Grow or something like that. But then in effect, instead of trusting an entity, you're choosing to trust your assets with a protocol, and that's the trade-off. So your perspective is correct, but again, like it's the nuance is in like who does the entity serve? In the case of Celsius, the entity serves the depositors rather than the shareholders in the way that a traditional retail bank might operate. So we, in effect, are more similar to what in the traditional world you would do if you were super wealthy and you could give money to a hedge fund.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time, and also I didn't want to come across as critical of Celsius in any way, honestly, like or centralized finance at all. I think we have amazing things going on. I guess I just was a little alarmed about the news from Coinbase today when they had to shut down or blacklist a bunch of wallets. So
No,
that was just.
I don't see. Look, I don't see anything you're saying as negative. That's not. We're having a conversation. My point is that I look. When we were formed, and we were. I think we were the first ones to file with the SEC. People screamed at us, right? People were like angry at me that I went and I poked the bear. You know, like what are you doing? Are you crazy? And I've said that then, and I'm saying it now that you know, we were also the first ones to do full KYC AML from the first customer, right? On everybody, including everybody who participated in our ICO and everything else. So we took the extreme because we knew that there's no way around regulators. There's no way around when you touch money. There's no way around governments and all that stuff. And I don't see a world in which people just holding their keys and transacting in DeFi creates mass adoption, right? So it's not that we don't like DeFi. We have billions of dollars deployed on DeFi. We are probably the largest borrower on DeFi. If we stop borrowing on DeFi, rates on DeFi would drop by 50%. So the issue is that 99% of the population in the world cannot interact with DeFi. That they have no clue what the public key. Like I said that before, people send me their private key and say, "Is this a private key?" Okay, so how do we educate people now? And every day I see people being scammed. You know, somebody asked me today. Somebody DM'd me and said, "Alex, why do you think there's so many scammers and hackers in crypto?" And my answer to him was, because there are so many people who fall for it, and that's why all the scammers and the hackers are concentrating it. It's so easy to steal from innocent people. So what Celsius created is a walled garden to protect all those people. We don't need to protect you. You're a pro. You can manage on DeFi. Wasim is a pro. He can manage on DeFi. But 99% of the population can't, right? And you want mass adoption. You want your coin, again, that bus ticket to be $1 million. We got to get all those people across from TradFi to CeFi. That's all we're saying.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us up on stage, Legend. Alex, we're butted up against time here. Do you want to do some closing thoughts?
Well, we can't go without Tecmo. I mean, he's raising his hand, so you gotta
Sure.
give him the last question.
Tecmo, you got the last question.
Hey, no question. I just wanted to share. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to share something I mentioned on our earlier South Texans spaces earlier today, and I mentioned to Scott that I got a cool opportunity this morning. I've been asked to do a crypto presentation at Camp David for a bunch of Marines, and it goes right along with what Alex was just saying, which is why I raised my hand. I'm supposed to educate them on all things crypto, but also because these are young Marines, it's about protecting them. I investigate scams literally every single day, and it's so easy, like Alex was saying. The people are falling for this because it's new and they don't quite understand it. So again, my presentation is just all things crypto, but a centralized exchange like Celsius is going to be an integral part of that education and protection when you have a company like GK8 and all the security features that Celsius provides and the guardrails in that situation. So it's just a cool opportunity I wanted to share, and that's part of the education that we need to give to the people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us, Tegma. Alex, if you want to give us a send-off.
Yeah, I need my beauty sleep. So again, tomorrow I'm in Washington meeting some, politicians or whatever, Congress people, and then I'm in Austin, Texas. If you're in Austin, come hang out with us. We have a meetup also, I think, on a Friday, right? Mosim, what day of the week is the meetup?
Saturday. We have an internal one Friday.
Okay, so on Saturday we'll be publishing the place. So if you're visiting South by or hanging out there, come hang out with us. We have a side event. The whole show. I think there's a booth also in the event, but we'll be hanging out at the. What's the name of that? Gosh, I blacked out.
Something house. Hold on.
Yeah, I think it's posted on our Twitter, on the Celsius Twitter, as well as on the Mashinsky Twitter. So you're welcome to come, meet in person, share your story, and become a Celsian, become an ambassador. And again, we do these things to kind of learn from each other, educate each other, and make the service better, the product better, and again, bring the next 100 million people into crypto. Our job, Celsius' job, is bring the people who need more help. Right? If you can sail on your own, you don't need a captain. But a lot of other people do need a captain, and Celsius is just trying to be a captain for all of the people who can't sail on their own. So thanks everybody for joining. This is a special week. Ukraine, Mother's Day, Women's Day. Sorry, Mother's Day. I definitely need some sleep, and I'll see you guys on Friday on MA. We'll be doing the MA from Austin. And I think the whole gang, I think we have 17 employees there now? How many, Wasim?
15, 16, depending on if you count one of them.
Right. And so we'll be doing from there. You'll get to meet the local clan. And again, see you on Friday. Take care, guys.
Bye, Alex. See you then.
Bye.
See you, everyone.
Guys, as you know, we work very hard to keep these rooms open for you, keep an open dialogue with the company. We do this every Tuesday and then throughout the week with South Texan and Celsius Bro. Make sure you're following myself, Zach, and Scott, and also our top community members, Plan C and Otis, to keep up on everything Celsius. Hope you all got something out of this. Have a good night.